across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 7 o'clock. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's so much to talk about, including Polanski under pressure. The Green Party leader has lied at various points. There are many people who are anti-Semitic in his party. How's he dealing with that on the eve of crucial local elections in England, in Wales as well, where the Assembly is going, the people are going to the polls for the Welsh Assembly. He's not the leader in Scotland, but his actions will have an impact there for the Greens. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about other issues of anti-Semitism as well, and the kind of probing that Zach Polanski has got, especially for saying things like he was a spokesman for the British Red Cross, which he absolutely was not. His approval rating has tumbled. We'll talk about civil servants faking work attendance, some for years. Some of them haven't been actually in their office for 2 or 3 years. They're going along to the office outside, logging into the Wi-Fi, and then not actually going in to the office but working from home. We'll find out why the suspect in the Madeleine McCann case cannot be extradited to the UK. That's due to Brexit. And also ask whether naming a road in Melton and Mowbray Pork Pie Way is demeaning to pigs. I wasn't entirely sure you could offend a pig. We'll talk about the travel chaos as well, and we'll also talk to the author of a new book on the women of Nuremberg. That's something that is often not focused upon, and we'll talk to her a little bit later on in the show. There's so many things to talk about this evening. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, please let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note less than a minute please, or you can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. We're trying very hard to get the heating in and the air conditioning in this studio sorted out, if you're wondering why I'm not wearing a jacket, but we will get that sorted before too long. Lots to discuss here on Talk. That number again, 0344 499 1000. So stay with us right through to 10 o'clock here on the Evening Exchange. Well, on Polanski, Lorraine has been in touch already and says the charlatan must be investigated for potential fraud. Polanski obtained money for crowdfunding by falsely stating he was an official spokesman for the Red Cross. He lied to women paying to have breast enlargements via hypnosis by falsely claiming he was a fully certified hypnotist. The man is not fit for office in Lorraine's opinion, and his behaviour is abhorrent. He knows exactly what he is saying. He's a con artist and a prolific liar who has profited from those lies. Well, I'm sure that Zach Polanski would reject that characterisation of him, but he was probed on all of this on Radio 4 this morning about the kind of false and disputed claims about jobs he's made in the past. He said, for example, he was a spokesman for the Red Cross. This is what he said to the BBC this morning.
You've made a series of false or disputed claims about jobs you've had in the past. Why, for example, did you say you were a spokesperson for the British Red Cross when they are absolutely clear that, though a supporter of theirs, you were never a spokesperson for them?
So I hosted various fundraisers for the British Red Cross, and indeed I would go on stage and speak for them about the amazing work they do tackling humanitarian crises, on the climate crisis, and indeed for refugees all around the world. I used the wrong word, and I accept that. It's important, though, and I accept this, that they don't support any political party, and I've made sure that's been taken down.
You've made a...
Well, that was Zach Polanski speaking to Radio 4 this morning. The Today programme, Nick Robinson was the other voice you heard there. There's so much going on here, and indeed the front page of the Daily Mail is 30 Green candidates probed over anti-Semitism. The millions of middle-class voters gulled by Polanski's cuddly rhetoric need to understand, the Daily Mail says, it's guaranteed to end in penury, misery and despotism. So they're very clearly taking aim at Zach Polanski, metaphorically, of course. But it's the anti-Semitism. I mean, if he said, I am a spokesman for the Red Cross, that is much less serious. It's not true. It wasn't true, and we've heard what he said in that clip there on Radio 4. But what's much, much more worrying is the anti-Semitism that is in the Green Party at the moment. There are the Daily Mail exposing how Green candidates had claimed Israelis and Jews were, as they put it, cockroaches behind the 7th of October and 9/11 atrocities, and a terrorist who stabbed 2 Jews to death in 2016 was a martyr. There are dossiers from all sorts of political parties. Labour, for example, having a dossier which features a raft of harrowing anti-Semitism, dangerous conspiracy theories and appalling comments about Hamas as well. People asking in the Green Party, how much does Israel pay Keir Starmer? Disgraceful. Lord Pickles, former special envoy on post-Holocaust issues, saying the leadership of the Green Party cynically exploited the conflict in Gaza for narrow political gain. Nigel Farage, the Greens will take us to sectarian hell. No Jew will be safe. Priti Patel, Dame Priti Patel, who is, of course, the shadow foreign secretary, says the Greens have a major anti-Semitism problem. At a time of rising hatred against Jewish people, Green Party candidates are fanning the flames of the world's oldest hatred. Their leader, Zach Polanski, should be condemning them and ridding his party of this bile, but instead he is fueling the fire. The Green Party themselves, their spokesman said, we're standing over 4,500 candidates in these local elections, the vast majority of whom we are proud to have represent us. While there are examples brought to our attention that do not align with the values of the Green Party, we're looking into them, and in some cases candidates have already been suspended. We are investing in strengthening our vetting procedures to prevent inappropriate candidates slipping through the net. Candidates who are under investigation have been asked not to campaign. Well, let's speak to Nicole Lampard, the journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism, about all of this. Nicole, you're very welcome to the programme. It's great to have you. What do you make of Zach Polanski and all that has been revealed about him? I would argue that the Red Cross stuff and various claims that he's made previously are less serious than the anti-Semitism, but it's still worthy of note. And actually, as I'm sure you've seen as I have, his personal poll ratings have taken a massive dip as a result of all of this.
Well, I agree that he feels to me like he's a charlatan. I've spoken to members of his family, and I find his backstory quite interesting. This is a bullied boy who is desperate for love. He's an actor, and he acts the part. And I see with what he's done, in particular, I'm upset. He is Jewish, and he has. When he joined the Green Party, even he understood what anti-Semitism was, and he fought against it in the Green Party. It's not like it suddenly arrived with him. But then he sensed this power based on the radicalization of this country, on the Gaza war, and he's basically ignored it for too long. And so, yeah, it is the more dangerous aspect of his personality, but it all fits into the same thing, which is self-aggrandizing and doing whatever he can for power, which is frightening. He knows, and because he knows what anti-Semitism is, that's what it feels personally painful for me, because this is someone who has the power to do better but won't, and that's because he knows that many of the hundreds of thousands of people who have joined the Greens since he started on this kind of populist bandwagon have joined for this reason, that there are lots of people. I've spoken to people campaigning locally in North London, for example, in Hackney, which is home to the second largest Jewish population in the country. And that may well go green. And a lot of the reason people are giving on the doorstep is Gaza, even though there's nothing that no local council can do about Gaza.
Well, the irony as well is that when he stood for the Lib Dems, he said a vote for me is a vote for Israel. He's changed his tune to a huge degree, and I would say he's been a hypocrite in that. I think there's strong evidence of that. Also, when you started speaking to his family members, he took aim at you as well, as he often does with journalists online.
Well, yeah, to say he wasn't happy was extraordinary. He was tweeting at me, about the Mail, who I'd wrote the story for, and all in all, it was 32 times in 48 hours. It was incessant because, of course, he has lots of followers, and every time he tweeted, I would then get absolutely mullered by many, many trolls, even more than I normally get mullered. And it was just quite a stressful weekend, really. And I was trying to respond to him because at one point he called me he called out my parasitic behaviour, when this is because I had spoken to his family members who had approached me to say how worried they were, and they were happy to say that because they wanted people to know that they did not stand with him. And, just to point out, he's got family members, including first cousins, who live in Israel. So this idea that he's anti-Zionist, I wrote this story just before the Greens debated their Zionism is racism motion, which in the end was timed out. But he wouldn't even speak candidly about that. He was so slippery he knows that that was a completely racist motion.
Yeah.
For the destruction of Israel, and he still couldn't call it out, because basically that would mean calling himself out. And the thing is, a lot of these anti-Zionist Jews, or any Jew that kind of falls part of a kind of extremist organization, they will turn on him, because they always do, because they still see him as Jewish, however much he professes to be one of them. The fact that some of these people...
And on that note, Nicole, I mean, my view of Polanski is he's just a bit of an idiot. I mean, I think he is slippery. I don't disagree with anything you say at all, but my impression of him is he's just a bit... He loves himself. He wants to be popular. He wants to, you know, he obviously has gone for leadership of the Green Party. He's been through so many different political movements. I mean, I know people who've spoken, who worked with him when he was a Lib Dem, and they said it's all the same, it's all about him. But I just wonder, I mean, you're part of a growing and popular party, and he's clearly struck a chord with a lot of people, but there's this underbelly of anti-Semitism there. There are these horrible, horrible people who don't like him and just see him as a vehicle for all of this. And I think they'll get rid of him when they don't need him anymore, when he's no longer useful. And from his perspective, I'm not defending anything he's said or done at all. Quite the opposite. I'm in your corner in this, Nicole. His treatment of you was absolutely disgraceful. The point I would say is he's just a bit stupid. He's sort of naive, a useful idiot. Do you think that's fair?
He's totally a useful idiot, but he should by now know how dangerous the people he's got into bed with. He's created this movement, and it's openly being backed by Islamist organizations. And that's the issue. So you have Mohsin Ali, who's his deputy, who's meeting up with the people that have been suspended, the few people that have been suspended for anti-Semitism, because a lot of these people that have said these horribly anti-Semitic stuff haven't even been suspended, but some of them have. And Mohsin Ali met with them and said, I'll help you to sue the Greens. That is who he's in bed with. So whether he's stupid or not, I don't know. Certainly his siblings aren't stupid. They're very clever. And one of the family members I spoke to said he is clever. I think that he is this lost little boy who has found this huge amount of adulation. He's riding this wave, and he doesn't really, he thinks he's in control of it, but he's completely not in control of it. And it is going to come back and bite him.
Yeah, and it's fascinating when you look at some of those examples of some of those candidates. We're not reading out their names at the moment, because you read out the name, you've got to read out, as you know, Nicole, you've got to read out the name of the whole of everyone who's standing in all those different constituencies. But some of the bile that's been there, 2 arrests as well, we know that this is a huge problem. And it was almost as if when Keir Starmer did, and I think we do have to give him some credit for getting rid of some levels of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, although it's still there in many, many ways. I suppose there's a question of where those people were going to go. And many of them, it appears, have gone to the Green Party.
Yeah, almost all of them. And they're people that were suspended for anti-Semitism. So this idea that the Greens should have just vetted better, they knew, and certainly the Jewish community was warning them long ago, this person was suspended for anti-Semitism, but they're being run as candidates. So this idea that they didn't know or hadn't properly vetted simply isn't good enough. You can hire companies, presumably, to go through and check out all these candidates. You have to put the money into it, particularly at this time where we've had people being murdered in Manchester for being Jewish. We've had numerous attacks. So anti-Semitism isn't a fun thing. It's a dangerous thing. And it's one that the Greens, not only do they not take it seriously, they have ridden that wave. They are popular because they are anti-Semites, not despite.
Nicole, as always worth listening to you. Lots of common sense. Thank you so much for Nicole Lambert, the journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism there. And just that YouGov poll saying that 47% of British people now have a negative opinion of Zach Polanski. That's a higher degree of negativity as from prior to the Golders Green attack. His worst rating since becoming Green leader. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. The local elections are, of course, tomorrow. You can vote in the morning between 7 and 10 in the evening. I will certainly be casting my vote. I'm not telling you how to vote in any particular way, of course. That would be a breach of electoral law, but I would encourage you to use your vote however you do so. Margaret in Birmingham says there's a pattern here with Zach Polanski. The wheels are coming off his party. He used the wrong word. What an excuse, says Margaret. And indeed, Liam in Accrington says it's good that the mainstream media are finally asking questions that talk have been asking for years. Hope you have a great show. Thank you, Liam. Much appreciated. Deborah says, as a vegan, I find pork pie way extremely offensive. Pigs are more intelligent than dogs. Pigs are still being gassed to death. It's wrong to treat, say, a species of God's sentient beings as food. It's unbelievable in this day and age. And that's a debate we're going to have a little bit later on the debate desk about that, actually. The civil service will come up too. Amanda's been in touch on that and says, good evening, Peter. Regarding the civil service, their disgraceful behaviour, along with so many other failings, can be firmly attributed to Tony Blair's time in government. We can only hope Nigel Farage and Reform UK are able to rebuild and restore our damaged and broken country to its former greatness. Very interesting one. And on the Greens, someone says just very quickly on a text says, let's face it, the Greens have blown it. I wonder what Heather in South Ayrshire thinks. She's given me a ring. First call of the evening exchange, 0344 499 1000. Heather, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I've been listening to what Nicole Lambert has been saying. I agree 100%. And another thing about Zach Polanski, he's got a narcissistic way of lying. He's cunning, deceiving, and sounds like he's got a self-loathing of himself, and that's what all these left wings have got in common: self-loathing and self.
Can we really tell that about him, Heather? Is that a fair criticism? I mean, if we put everybody's life under the microscope, we might find things that we've said or done in the last few years that may not have been entirely accurate, and he's having a real microscope up to everything he's ever said and done.
It's like nobody. Have you heard of this saying? There's a song, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
That's true as well. Nobody's perfect.
Well, that's true. Should we give him, I mean, given that nobody's perfect, should we give him a bit of leeway, do you think, Heather? Or no?
We categorically lied all the way of who he is, and he's given himself what called a false perception of himself. He's not being real about these things, and he's not being real about himself. He's Jewish. Maybe he don't like being Jewish, and those in the Green Party who are anti-Semitic.
He certainly hangs around quite a number of people who really don't like Jewish people, and I find that very strange. Heather, thank you. Graham in Bushy's been in touch and says Zach Polanski is the acceptable face of the Green Party, a party that has attracted anti-Semites and Gaza supporters. At the next general election, when they get several more MPs, will the Green MPs push out Polanski and install their new leader, someone that's more aligned with the Gaza independent MPs? Graham, I think that is something that may well happen. I think that Zach Polanski may be seen as that useful idiot. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with all those party leaders. We're going to talk a little bit about Starmer actually in a minute, and interestingly, the deputy leader of his party has had a few things to say about him recently. We'll do all of that. We'll talk about Polanski, we'll talk about the civil service, we'll talk about Pork Pie Way on the debate desk. Candace Holdsworth is coming up, as is Ebbs Akintade. They're going to give us their wisdom and tell me yours as well. Pick up the phone, let me know whatever is on the tip of your tongue about any of those issues. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Neil Kinnock felt the Labour Party. He changed the Labour Party. He thought he might be the Prime Minister in 92. We didn't win. But he had that feeling for the Labour Party. That doesn't exist with Keir Starmer, I'm afraid. Look, I often say, Jeremy, the Labour Party is the nearest thing I've got to a religion. But if the Labour Party was the Church of England, Keir Starmer would be the chief executive of it.
But he's the God. It means he's your God right now.
Well, he's not the spiritual leader, is my point.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Many thanks to Heather who gave me a ring there. You can too, 0344 499 1000. Lovely to get voice notes as well. If you want to send those in on the same number too, you can just do it through WhatsApp. And text to 87222. Penny has sent one of those in and says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Penny. There's something seriously wrong with Zach Polanski as well as a few others. The UK is doomed anyway, but if the Green Party get in, I just don't know what will happen. We're voting reform as our last chance, says Penny. The lunatics really are running the asylum. And thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who says, as a logically minded man, Peter, well, I'll let you be the judge of that. I simply cannot understand how anyone can fail to take on board the dangers of listening to people who tell lies, promise much, but therefore thereafter deliver disaster. Worse, the same people cannot comprehend the danger to us all from accruing more and more debt. Worse still, they seem to meekly accept being conned over and over again. I despair, says Tad. Well, thank you for that message. And also on Twitter, Isabel says, Peter, surely as a former special advisor, you find it incredulous that civil servants are driving to their office entrance in Whitehall or regional office in order to pick up a Wi-Fi signal and then drive home. Well, Isabel, that is absolutely what is happening, and we know certainly that civil servants are faking office attendance, failing to set foot in the office for years. This is an investigation by the Telegraph talking about whistleblowers who've exposed a work-from-home scandal gripping the public sector. They're saying that the rule is that you've got to be in the office if you're a civil servant 3 days a week. But insiders have told the Telegraph that managers have no control over remote staff who are taking advantage of flexible working arrangements. One saying Whitehall offices are like the Mary Celeste, particularly on Friday. I don't know if you tried to get through to HMRC recently. I know a lot of journalism is full of freelancers and people who do their tax in weird and wonderful ways, and I'm one of those people. And trying to get through to HMRC is a nightmare. The last time I tried to do it, I was on hold for 42 minutes. I literally said, hello, my name is didn't even get to the end of Peter, and they cut me off and I had to ring again. So, I mean, it's not as if they heard my name and then cut me off, which they couldn't be blamed for doing. Some staff, including at HMRC, are alleged to affect in-person working by connecting to their office Wi-Fi from a nearby car park. So they go to the car park, connect to the Wi-Fi, and then say, all right, well, that registers your attendance in the office, and then go home. Astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. Let's go to the debate desk with Candace Holsworth and Ebbs Akintade. Welcome to you both. How are you doing?
Good.
Fine, good to see you. Candace, what do you make of these civil servants?
I'm not surprised at all. So I've got friends who work in the civil service, and they said to me, if one day I ever wanted to get my revenge on my workplace, I could talk about the work culture, because they said it's gotten really, really, really bad. And we know civil service productivity has crashed recently.
So what do they say? What do they tell you?
Laziness, disorganisation, can't get anything done, very, very low expectations. There's also, I mean, we haven't discussed it with this because this is mainly about productivity, but there's also like a political monoculture as well. That's very difficult.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so if you are a conservative person, you're pretty scared to voice your opinion or to reveal your true beliefs. You sort of have to hide, which I don't think you have to do. I know
one particular conservative leading civil servant who would say exactly the same thing. It's interesting, actually, when I worked for the civil service, well, I worked within the civil service, I wasn't a civil servant. There were lots of civil servants who I thought sort of got the politics but weren't political themselves. But I think I was exposed to a lot of people in what's called private office that sort of senior people who deal with the ministers and so on, but there's a lot of civil service culture, I think, that would certainly be along those lines.
Yes, I agree. I think that, look, I don't have something against working from home, but I think you've got to manage the culture and the expectations. Like, a lot of law and tech firms have people who just work from home, but the expectations, because these are profit-driven companies, they get out of their employees what they need. But I feel like in the civil service and government in general, they just don't have that existential fear, and it makes them soft. soft and weak.
But isn't that weird? Because is it because managers themselves are not working from home either? So it's not like they can't practice what they don't preach, because if they're not working from home, they can't manage their staff who aren't working from home. So there's this laid-back culture, as indeed culture exists in the workplace, just kind of continues to persist and goes round and round and round and round. And post-pandemic, let's not forget, because in the pandemic you all had to work from home to some degree, but unless you have a valid reason as to why you need to come into work, everyone has a reason that, oh, you know, I've got childcare, oh, I've got all these other things going on.
But if you're contracted, I mean, I know exactly what you're saying, Ebbs, and there were some people, of course, who couldn't work from home at all. There were loads of people who, generally the people who stand on their feet, you know, the hairdressers, the security guards, the waiters and waitresses, who couldn't work from home, and many of them lost a lot of money as a result. But how do you manage people who you can't see? That's what I always wonder, unless you can measure their productivity in some way. But when it comes to the civil service, well, there are some ways of measuring productivity, but you can't do it in other ways. And I think, you know, if someone says, oh, childcare issues, or I have, you know, I've got a dentist appointment or whatever, that to a degree, okay, fine. Yeah. But if you're employed to be 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, you should be maybe at a desk at home, but at your desk 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. That's the way it should be. Yeah, because obviously your employers can dictate exactly how your working patterns are, and also they can dictate where you're supposed to be. So if this culture of working from home, it's like, why do I need to come in? I can just stay at home. Do we demonise working from home? I have a friend who works from home a lot and is a much more productive working from home. And actually, when he goes into his work in the civil service, or in a sort of civil service, working for the government kind of job, he actually books meeting rooms because he finds the office environment, people talking all the time, quite distracting. So I'm not against working from home per se. There are some people who said that this is something that is shouldn't be allowed, for example. What do you think, Candice?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not against it ideologically. Some people are against it because I think there are people who work in computer science, for instance, and they need a sort of very quiet atmosphere where they can just lock in and focus, and they're often highly, highly, highly productive. But that's not everyone. I think there are a lot of people who take advantage of it. I mean, I remember during COVID, someone I knew, she would sunbathe the entire day and in the last hour of work would get all her work done. And she admitted that. She was proud of it.
But that shows the job as well.
Yes.
That you, I know people as well, not actually in the civil service, but other jobs, who you can time when emails are sent. So there were time for sort of 2 minutes after 9, showing you're at your desk at 9 o'clock. Then after lunch, 2 minutes past 2 or whatever. But actually they weren't at all. I mean, there are creative ways and people will get around it. But the problem is, Ebbs, it's kind of weird and funny, but also we're not getting value for money as taxpayers. We're paying the highest tax since the Second World War as a proportion of GDP, and we're not getting these civil servants who have great pensions, far better pensions than the three of us, I would imagine, who are not turning up for work.
You know what? I think there's a thin line between like grouping all civil servants in the same category as to be.
Some are very good. Some are very good.
I think it's only an exceptional few, so it's not the masses. It isn't. But of course, if you're not being managed, you can do what you want to do in the way you want to do it, and that obviously can lead to laziness and timed emails and sunbathing all day.
Sunbathing,
absolutely. Ridiculous.
I'd love to sunbathe all day. I mean, I don't think perhaps today is the day, but an HMRC employee told the Telegraph a lot of bad habits were formed during COVID. You can go years at a time without seeing certain colleagues, more than 2 years in some cases. Analysis of working patterns at HMRC revealed that 3,195 of its workers had not been in the office for between 6 and 11 months, with 992 not attending for a year to 23 months. There are 182 workers who did not go to work in person for 2 years or more. And this is at the same time as MPs found that almost 44,000 taxpayers were cut off after being on hold for over an hour with HMRC call handlers. One texter says they need to be in the office. It's typical. Anything to do with civil servants, they're absolute hypocrites. Mike in Blackpool says, my wife works from home 2 days a week. She says that she gets more done at home than in work, like my friend, for example, because of all the interferences with colleagues, talking, coffee breaks. She works for the civil service and her department has quotas that must be completed every day. If they aren't achieved, then this is investigated for the reasons as to why. So not all civil servants are not working. As long as the set levels of work are achieved, then there's no reason why home working should stop. Mike, I think I'm with you, actually. I'm not against working from home per se, but I'm against people swinging the lead, and that is clearly happening, Candice.
Yes, and the thing is, this person did work for a government department, like this person I was talking about, and what I think is, like I said, there's no existential dread. So, I mean, her manager was obviously not looking after things correctly or not realising what was going on, because I guess he's not worried about the company going under.
Yeah,
you know, he's not a CEO and founder who's like, come on, like, you got to do what I need you to do or we're all out of business. And I think that can be the big issue.
Should there be greater... I mean, this whole issue, I've grappled with it since I was a special advisor, of how you bring some form of accountability to people who essentially can't lose their jobs. It is very, very rare for civil servants to lose their jobs, very rare for teachers to lose their jobs, for example. How do you bring that accountability in, do you think, Ebbs?
I don't know. I think you can very much dictate to people, right, you need to be in the office at least 2 times a week, and you just... I don't know, I don't know, because you can't treat adults like children. So in as much as you can dictate to them, do you then say, oh, you have to clock in and clock out and actually be visibly seen in the office? Because then
I think that's fair enough.
But then there's an element of, well, you clearly don't trust what we do, and if that creeps into the workplace, then you have a workplace that doesn't trust management.
Well, is it broken? Is the system broken in this regard? Because this person telling the Telegraph about a lot of bad habits formed during the COVID lockdowns. Maybe we just can't get that back.
No, we can't. But like a lot of things that happen from COVID, they start a new trend, and it's very difficult to shake off that trend.
And work has changed a lot in those times, hasn't it, Candice?
Massively. And look, maybe in some ways it is positive, right? So I mean, I know a lot of people who hated the presenteeism. So you're sat there at your desk and you're not doing anything productive, but you just need to be there. Whereas now I think people are like, well, no, you can sort of be a bit flexible, and that there's things that you can do to manage your time more effectively. But I do think, I mean, we all know that a huge number of people are now signed off work for anxiety and depression, and not being encouraged to go back into work. They're sort of just being written off. So there's a lot, we are suffering a lot of the long tail effects of COVID that are having such a negative effects, and I think people are becoming a lot more bitter. Those who pay tax and work are becoming a lot more bitter about those who don't.
There's a big divide, definitely, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a massive divide, and of course it is quite personality based, because I love going into work. During COVID, I was working just for Guards and Thomas's, and I was in work every day throughout the pandemic, and I was very, very proud that I could be there, and I didn't want to work from home, because I find working from home means I'm more or less working from the fridge, and I keep popping to the fridge and getting some more food. So just for my own waistline, I was happy to be in work. It's very personality driven, and we've got to be careful not to ignore those who have special requirements, who do need or want to or have to work from home more.
I wonder what would happen if I went to my boss and said, you know what, I quite like to work flexibly. I'd like to work from home for an hour, and then I'll come in at 8 o'clock and I'll do the show for 2 hours, but I'll do 1 hour from home. You can do it on Zoom for an hour, I'll be fine. I'm not sure he'd be that happy. You know, Kevin O'Sullivan, he could just do another hour, I'll be fine. I'll just do 2 hours, you can pay me the same amount of money, you know, it's fine.
Well, that's it, right? Like, totally. And during COVID, like, it was quite funny though. I was like, yeah, I can put my kids in nursery because I have a very important job. I'm a journalist, okay? And that is an essential job.
That's it. Graham says most civil servants wouldn't last 5 minutes in the commercial world. Glyn says if a person can perform a full day's work in an hour, then the system needs a thorough audit. Well, that's a good point as well, but I do find that there are a lot of people who are productive and not productive, and the presenteeism, that's a really good point you made, because I've worked in plenty of offices, and we do know those people who come in at 5 to 9, they leave at 5:05, they take an hour for lunch, and their productivity is rubbish. And then there's another colleague who, oh, I'm sorry, my kid was ill, or there's a problem, or a dentist appointment or whatever, and they come in, they sort of trundle in at 9:30, but they do the work of sort of 3 or 4 people through the day, and then they might leave a bit early or leave a bit later or whatever, but it all sort of magically balances out. Whereas there are people who just are there and tick the boxes for presenteeism. I worked in the civil service for a short time. I did a summer job, and there was this sort of flexi time core hours idea that you were there between 10 and 12 and 2 and 4, but you could be flexible around the rest of the time. There was one woman I worked with, I got on with her very well actually, but her manager didn't come in until 9 o'clock. She always came in at 8 o'clock in the morning, had a cup of tea, read the paper for an hour, then the manager came in and she started work. So I'm afraid there are people like that in many offices. Melanie's been in touch from Staffordshire and says, I think think people should be able to have 2 days, no more, at home and have to submit electronically evidence of what they've done. It's not treating adults like children, it is monitoring staff. And one on Pork Pie Way as well. Angie says, hey Cardi P, I wouldn't mind living in Pork Pie Way, Pork Scratchings Way or Bacon Sandwich Way. I suspect you would like to live in Diet Coke Way. Great show. Well, I say cheers to that. Certainly, Angie, I'll have a slurp of this while we go to a break. We're back on the debate desk in a minute or two.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Martin has sent me a voice note. This is what he says on civil servants.
This thing with civil servants not going into work, there is a very simple solution. You have an independent person who walks in there, goes and checks the desks, goes and checks who's logged in and who's logged out, not from a local cafe, but actually physically in the office. I worked in the Middle East for a few years, and this was a regular routine, and people checked. And if they weren't there, they weren't paid. It's a very simple one. Whether it would work here, I'm not sure, but it's certainly worth a try. I think the civil servants and the blob are taking somewhat of a... I can't really say the right word I'm thinking of on air.
Does it rhyme with dis or kiss? Perhaps. Extracting the Michael is often what I say. Listen, very, very interesting message from you. Maybe there are some civil servants out there. Maybe they've been working very hard all day. I'd love to hear from them. 0344 499 1000. Because as I know, I've worked with a number of really, really good civil servants who work very, very hard, but there are some who just don't, and maybe that's the case in businesses as well, but it is harder, I think. We'll come back to that, certainly, and if you want to talk about it, do give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. I want to talk a little bit about Starmer now. We're coming into these local elections in England tomorrow, Scottish parliamentary elections, Welsh Assembly elections happening tomorrow. On the show on Friday between 7 and 9, we're going to go into all the results that are out there and really question where Starmer's position is. Lucy Powell is the deputy leader of Labour. She was famously dumped from the cabinet and returned in a blaze of glory as deputy leader of the Labour Party. She's backed Starmer. She spoke to Sky News, but saying she wants the King of the North himself, Andy Burnham, back in Parliament. This is what Lucy Powell has been telling Sky News.
We've needed to be set out a clearer sense of direction and a clearer purpose. I think we've started to see that coming through, and I'm pleased about that. But these elections are coming round faster than that.
What I'm getting to is that you keep saying we, but isn't it that people are really upset with Keir Starmer?
Look, Keir is the leader of the Labour Party, so of course he gets the most stick of everybody. There's no question of that.
Well, he makes the decisions.
And he doesn't make all the decisions, but obviously he takes full responsibility for the decisions of the Labour Party and of the government. And he's been the first to admit where he has made mistakes, whether it was the appointment of Peter Mandelson, whether it was around the winter fuel payments. You know, that's still an issue sometimes on the doorstep with pensioners as well.
But do you think he is the right leader to lead this change agenda?
Yes.
And just finally then, Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester Mayor, would you like to see him back in Parliament? I know that you supported him to stand in the Gorton and Denton by-election.
Yeah, I would.
You would like him back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Andy is an incredibly popular, relatable and effective politician. So if Andy wants to come back to Parliament, I will continue to support him.
Lucy Powell there, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, speaking to Sky News. Putting a brave face on it, Ebbs, or what do you make of what she said there, particularly in regard to Starmer?
Yeah, I think he is... I do think he is on the brink of some kind of collapse within the party. I might be talking the obvious there, but there's always a thin line when you're Prime Minister between this lovely... nice balance between leading the party and having the party on your side, and I think I can see the balance tipping against him. Tomorrow is obviously a big day in terms of indicating how the people feel about the party, and that could go negatively against him. And because of the way we are, because of certain sensitivities about things, because of what the Labour Party have done while they've been in power for the last, is it 18 months?
Nearly 2 years.
Nearly 2 years.
Close.
And there have been lots of things that they have done U-turns on. Winter fuel is obviously a big thing for a lot of people, and these kind of subject matters matter to people, and I don't think he has shone as brightly as he could have done. Should he go? I don't know. I'm still sat on the fence, because if he goes, the one thing we don't need is yet more instability. So erring on the side of caution, I don't think he should go. I just don't think he's being a powerful enough leader as he should be.
It's interesting, John Major, the former Prime Minister, said that we need to stop chopping and changing Prime Ministers. He was, of course, Prime Minister for 7 years. I'm not sure in the current atmosphere with everything they threw at John Major, and he was, you know, created quite a few problems for himself as well, that he would have remained Prime Minister for 7 years in the current political atmosphere. I just wonder what your thoughts are, Candice, in regard to Starmer and how long he lasts.
Yes, so that's such an interesting point, and what John Major's comments made me think of is that, yes, I mean, it's like it's a deadly job now, being a Prime Minister of Britain. Like you're going to get thrown out pretty much sooner or later. I mean, how many have we had now? But I think what it shows is that the systemic problems are so deep and so great, and we just don't have any political leaders that are able to get to grips with it. I mean, even if Keir Starmer
Can they? Does the person exist who can solve all the problems? I mean, we've had some pretty strong Prime Ministers in my lifetime, I would argue, you know, Thatcher and Blair. Not a fan of Blair, but he was a strong Prime Minister. Does the system, does the way we think about politics, the way we scrutinise politics, the way we live, actually allow for a strong leader these days?
I think so. I think some people can rise to the moment and become great statesmen or stateswomen. Like, you know, Margaret Thatcher emerged from absolutely nowhere and was seen to sort of capture the moment. I think in America you have figures like Marco Rubio. And I would say, and I'm not being in any way biased here, but I think someone like Kemi Badenoch has really come into herself, and people really like her, and they see her as an actual leader.
No, do they?
They might not like the Conservatives, but they like Kemi Badenoch, and all the polling shows that.
Not a fan?
No, I'm not a fan, and I'm not sure if I can agree with people that actually like her.
Can you tell us why you're not a fan?
Why I'm not a fan? Because I believe that she does what anyone in opposition would do, and it's almost like whatever Keir says, she's going to rally against.
Her job is to oppose.
Yes, I know it's to oppose, but in the same way that you can oppose, but also then come up with another strategy, another alternative.
Do you not think she's come up with a clear plan of what to do?
No, I don't. I think politics over the last decade or so has been more about opposition and less about constructive criticism, less about alternatives. So we end up just speaking in this echo chamber of arguments, but nothing is actually produced. I don't think Henry's the strongest leader in the world either. So when it comes to finding alternative people to lead in power, there is no one else. So that's why if Keir goes, God forbid Keir goes, there will be this whole uproar and complete discontent because there'll be no one strong enough to follow him. It's like every leader becomes less powerful, less certain, less solid than the last.
But I would say one thing I've been impressed with about her is she does think about things in terms of systems. And I don't think it's just rhetoric. I don't think she just opposes for the sake of opposing. I think she does think about things in terms of the broader picture and how to solve things from the bottom up.
She certainly put Labour under pressure to some degree, and also another political leader under pressure we've been talking about a little bit earlier in this programme is Zach Polansky. We've heard from him. In fact, I think we'll probably play these two clips actually. The first one of him on Radio 4 this morning. He claimed that he was a spokesman for the British Red Cross. That wasn't true. This is what he told the BBC this morning. He was interviewed by Nick Robinson.
You've made a series of false or disputed claims about jobs you've had in the past. Why, for example, did you say you were a spokesperson for the British Red Cross when they are absolutely clear that though a supporter of theirs, you were never a spokesperson for them?
So I hosted various fundraisers for the British Red Cross, and indeed I would go on stage and speak for them about the amazing work they do tackling humanitarian crises, on the climate crisis, and indeed for refugees all around the world. I used the wrong word, and I accept that. It's important, though, and I accept this, that they don't support any political party, and I've made sure that's been taken down.
You've made...
And the anti-Semitism accusations, certainly, and the evidence that is there, and a couple of arrests that have happened of Green candidates is the front page of many of the papers, including the Daily Mail today. And Pat McFadden, who's about as loyal as you can get to Keir Starmer, he's the Work and Pensions Secretary, was asked about this, particularly in regard to Labour and its problems with anti-Semitism under Jeremy Corbyn. This was on Times Radio this morning.
Do you think the party has a problem with anti-Semitism? I mean, are these the same people who were expelled from the Labour Party in the Corbyn years?
Some of them are, yeah. Yes, some of them are. Look, I think last week when we saw that attack on Jewish people in Golders Green, the response to that is a test of leadership. Now, it's one thing to run on vibes, but when you get more scrutiny, what you really stand for matters. And his instincts at that moment was to stick up for the person holding the knife, not for the police officers trying to stop the person holding the knife. I think that's revealing. I think it speaks volumes. Not for nothing do we say your first duty as a political leader is to protect the public. He failed that duty last week, and he would also fail it in a wider sense with policies to leave NATO, to ask US bases to leave. We simply cannot, in this uncertain world, abandon the duty to protect the public.
Pat McFadden speaking to your sister station Times Radio earlier today. What do you think of the position of Zach Polansky, Ebbs?
I think Zach Polansky needs to be just careful, because obviously the Green Party have been very much out there in the public in terms of people noticing them. It's because everything is so critically picked apart. He has to now be very careful in terms of how he rides whatever wave that he's riding, because obviously people will knock him down if he says anything that's remotely untrue, which they're clearly doing, and they're picking apart every little tweet.
He's a political leader. He's there to be under scrutiny. That's the game, isn't it, Candace?
Yeah, and I think Rachel Reeves found that out, right? When there were things on her CV that
didn't quite
iffy.
Rachel from Customer Services.
Oh, yeah, chess champion, all that stuff, you know. Yeah, so I mean, Zach Polansky is finding this out. I mean, they've grown very fast, the Greens. I mean, they've sort of, you've got populism on the right, which is quite well understood, but populism on the left, I mean, people don't really understand that too well. And you can see that Labour is looking at the populists from the right and the populists from the left, and they're feeling very, very under threat. But I think what comes with that sort of fast growth is it's very clear that they have not vetted candidates properly, and also maybe been a bit unscrupulous, right? Like just trying to ride waves without thinking about it.
That may well be part of it. Hilton in St Albans says, in Islam, the colour green holds significant symbolism. It represents paradise, nature and life, and is considered the Prophet Muhammad's favourite colour. It's associated with the clothes of people in Jannah, which is paradise. Is it a coincidence that the Green Party has a massive Islamic following? Well, it may be a coincidence, but I think it's more to do with entryism into that party, no matter what it was called. But thank you for the message. Lots of people getting in touch about the civil service and working and Starmer, and lots of people, Melanie saying all workplaces should have a signing in book which requests signatures. Signatures in it can be checked if it is needed for fire safety. Calling people digitally just waste the time of management and staff in the case of a fire. Very interesting. Robin Poole says it's obvious why the laziness in the civil service goes unchecked. The managers are dealing with somebody else's money, so they have no skin in the game. It's easier to let employees get away with it, says Robin Poole. Lots more to discuss on all of this. We'll also be on the debate desk with Candace and Ebbs for another little while, talking about why the Madeleine McCann suspect can't be extradited due to Brexit. Nurseries being urged to report racist toddlers, yes, really, to police, and whether you would live in a place called Pork Pie Way. Stay with us.
Neil Kinnock felt the Labour Party. He changed the Labour Party. He thought he might be the Prime Minister in 92. We didn't win. But he had that feeling for the Labour Party. That doesn't exist with Keir Starmer, I'm afraid. Look, I often say, Jeremy, the Labour Party is the nearest thing I've got to a religion. But if the Labour Party was the Church of England, Keir Starmer would be the chief executive of it.
But he's the God. It means he's your God right now.
Well, he's not the spiritual leader, is my point.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then, let's go through these three other issues. The Madeleine McCann suspect can't be extradited due to Brexit. Candace, your thoughts on this?
Well, come on, it's not Brexit, is it? It's the German constitution. Any third country, I mean, it could be the US, it could be Australia, US is a fellow NATO member, he wouldn't be able to be extradited.
But if it's France, though, that's seemed a fellow country because it's in the EU.
Yes.
So yeah.
So for me, it doesn't really make sense. Like,
Ebs?
What, it's just like blame Brexit for anything?
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot that you can blame Brexit on, but I have to agree with Candice. I don't think you can blame Brexit for that.
Okay.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Let's talk about nurseries urged to report racist toddlers to police. Tell us a little bit about this, Candice.
Yeah, so apparently there's been some guidance written to nurseries in Wales that's been backed by Welsh Labour that says that nursery school children should be reported if they in any way show racism. I mean, I've not encountered many racist 4- and 3-year-olds in my lifetime, so I can't imagine there'll be a lot.
Yeah, what do you think of this, Eb? Should we be monitoring what this is?
I just thought this was like an April Fool's story, and then I realised no, it's the 6th of May, and this is actually a story. How can you? Kids have the purest minds,
yes,
and so of course they can't be racist. How are you supposed to report racist toddlers to the police? It's absolute nonsense. You're wasting police time. You're wasting newspaper time. You're wasting my time.
So when I was a kid, I was always really interested. I was just very, very sort of curious, interested kid, curiously strange kid as well. But I was because we were this was Northern Ireland back in the day, tail end of the Troubles, and I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I remember there's one particular occasion where we'd gone on holiday to the Republic of Ireland. We'd become friends with these people who were on holiday as well, had kids about the same age, whatever. And I said to my mum really loudly, I said, are these people Catholics? Really loudly, which at that time was not something you really said. My mum was just, shh, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. But it was just coming from like curiosity. It wasn't. There was nothing sectarian about it.
Absolute innocence.
Yeah, and kids sometimes say and do weird things. They also often don't notice. I don't know what your experience has been, but kids don't often notice race or whatever. So
not in a negative way. They might say like, "Oh, but why do I look like this and someone else looks like that?" But it's in the most innocent, sweet way. It's never negative.
Uncle Ebs, why are you a different colour to me? I get that. I got that from my godchildren when they were tiny. They're not being racist.
Yeah, they're just asking a perfectly legitimate question.
Purely innocent question from what they see.
How did you answer that question?
I said it's because my parentage is from a different place than you. In this world, people come from different places and different colours, and in your life you're going to meet so many people who have so many different shades, and we're all the same essentially.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, perfect answer. And finally, how would you feel about living in Pork Pie Way?
Yeah, much better than vegan pie way. Have you noticed when these
vegan sausage roll way?
Oh my gosh, like they mangle language. It just feels wrong.
You've been anti-vegan now?
Yes, very.
Of course you are.
Are you being anti-pig?
I'm absolutely being anti-pig. Yeah.
Would you live in Pork Pie Way?
I wouldn't mind living in Pork Pie. Pork Pie Way sounds fun.
If you get a free pork pie, I mean, I'd be up for it.
Every time you go on the road.
Every time you come home, there's just a free pork pie waiting for you. Pork pies are delicious.
Yes, they are delicious.
But there are people worried about this and saying it's demeaning to pigs, and pigs are very intelligent animals, Ebs.
Yes, pigs are very intelligent.
They're not that intelligent,
though. But I mean, for the people who are complaining, they're obviously not intelligent at all.
I mean, they cannot. I mean, they're not capable.
Is this serious? Is this serious?
This is a serious story. Yes.
They are not capable of taking offence. I mean, I know we anthropomorphise animals now, but really, do you think pigs are like stewing about people saying terrible things about them?
Don't say stewing too much because they'll think of apples that go with the pork as well. Whatever you think about this, whether you be happy to live in Pork Pie Way, whether you think Christian Brickner's not here because of Brexit, or whether you are the parent of a racist toddler or not, please do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. My huge thanks to Candice Holdsworth and Ebs Akintade, who are political commentators, both for joining me on the debate desk this evening. Plenty more to come. We'll talk about the civil servant story with the former immigration minister, Kevin Foster, who's joining us in just a second to give his thoughts on all of that. But I want your thoughts too. Please do give me a ring. Pick up the phone, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here on the Evening Exchange, here right through until 10 o'clock. Lots of people getting in touch about civil servants. This is a story today about civil servants faking work attendance, some for years, not coming in for 2 or 3 years to the office, working from home. Is working from home actually that bad? Some people can be more productive when they're working from home, but 2 or 3 years that you're not in the office, very interesting one. We'll talk to a former minister about that in a second. He's seen plenty of good civil servants and perhaps some bad ones too. We'll also talk about the travel chaos that's incoming. Airlines set to axe 2 million seats in May in wake of the soaring jet fuel costs. I'm going away in May to Northern Ireland and indeed to France, so I really hope that those are okay. Ryanair as well, the boss Michael O'Leary calling for a ban on early morning airport drinks as bad behaviour rises. Do you want your early morning drink when you're heading off on holiday? It's a British tradition. We'll talk about the Madeleine McCann suspect who can't be extradited thanks to Brexit with Joe Wheeler, who was one of our commentators, of course, on the debate desk. She's got many strings to her bow, but she was one of the first people on the scene when Madeleine McCann went missing. We were a reporter in Praia de Luz in Portugal. We'll talk to you a little bit later on to the author of a new book about the women of Nuremberg. Fascinating book and a much forgotten aspect of that horrendous way, or the very good way with Nuremberg trials, certainly, that they dealt with the horrendous aspect of the Holocaust. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. I want to make sure you get your voice and your opinion on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute, please. Send them through, we'll play them out. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10. Stay with us here on Talk. Lots of people getting in touch on civil servants. This is a very, very interesting story about civil servants working from home, some of whom have not been in the office for up to 3 years. This is the Daily Telegraph investigation saying that some civil service officers are like the Mary Celeste on Fridays. HMRC definitely in their sights. Some staff alleged to have faked in-person working by connecting to their office Wi-Fi from a nearby car park before returning home. Labour facing calls for an immediate inquiry, the government being accused of rewarding part-time work with full-time pay. One civil servant says staff showed up to work for only a few hours before going home. It meant you're down for attending for the day and in theory you're working in the office, but said in reality staff are working from home. The HMRC as well, working patterns revealing that 3,195 of its workers not in an office between 6 and 11 months, 992 of them not attending for up to 2 years, and 182 workers who did not go into work for more than 2 years. 182 people. How is that possible? How can you possibly manage those people, have conversations with them? Yes, Zoom exists and all the rest of it, and I worked a bit from home during the pandemic. I couldn't do it in this job, and there are lots of jobs, of course, where people work hard, pay their taxes, and they're standing on their feet all day and they have to be physically present. I think of the security guards in this building. I think of the makeup women who did my makeup this evening. I think of the waiter who served me a cup of tea a bit earlier on across the road. There's so many people who must be very aggrieved by this, paying their taxes, and are we getting full value for it? Well, let's speak to Kevin Foster now. Kevin's the former immigration minister and working in the Home Office and alongside civil servants. Kevin, you will know, like I do, that there's some civil servants who do a brilliant job. They're really good people, dedicated to their work. I was very privileged as a special advisor for 3.5 years to work in 4 different departments, and there's some really superb civil servants. But one of the questions I had coming out of that, and maybe you do as a former minister too, is how you hold people who don't work hard, or people who do the wrong thing, accountable, especially when, unlike politicians, unlike special advisors, it's very, very difficult for them to lose their jobs. What do you think of this issue?
Yeah, you sum it up very well. Peter. You know, there are people who go the extra mile. I can think of people, for example, some in Border Force who literally volunteered to get flown into Kabul as the Taliban was taking the city over to help process people's documents to get people out, including British citizens. So, you know, there are some people who will go the extra mile, but like in any large organisation, there'll be others who will try and cut corners and who'll look to try and avoid what they should be doing, you know, try and get an easy life. And some of this stuff we've heard today sounds like the sort of thing you'd expect in an episode of On the Buses, you know, where people, you know, pulling up in a car park and logging into the Wi-Fi so they can sort of claim they've been in. Well, that's just straight fraud. If you're doing that, you know that you are creating a false impression, and that really raises questions what on earth you're doing dealing with people's personal data and tax affairs. And yes, there is a balance. Some work from home can help add flexibility, perhaps if someone's got caring commitments or family commitments, that allows them to balance that with their job.
Do you think the civil service has been
need to be in the office?
Do you think the civil service has been too flexible? Because I'm all for workplace flexibility. I'm all for people working productively. I want to be compassionate, certainly when it comes to disability or caring or all sorts of problems that people have. But do you think, I mean, clearly there are people who are not doing the right thing here. We're talking about hundreds of people in HMRC who haven't been in the office for 3 years. I mean, that is not just being a bit understanding. That is people who are clearly not working the way they're meant to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And if someone has been unable to do their job for that long, then you probably, as an employer, should be having a difficult conversation with them about when they might be able to return to work. It's certainly what will be happening in the private sector. But there will be times when you do need people in, you know, and there's certain conversations as a manager about things like performance you shouldn't be having with an employee on Zoom. Ideally, you should have it face to face. But there's been a culture allowed to develop since COVID. And I remember when Jacob Rees-Mogg was rightly pushing the case to get people back into the office to do essential roles, and some of the criticism he got. But you even see recently, I think it was the ONS, where they had a dispute over the fact that they were being required to come in the office for, wait for it, 2 days a week. You know, and they were objecting to that. You know, there comes a point where virtually every private company, it requires people to be in on some days. And as you say, rightly, many taxpayers working in jobs like in sectors like construction, where quite clearly working from home is rather hard if you're a bricklayer or a carpenter or an electrician. You know, you can't really take the client's house home with you to work on, who'll be paying tax and thinking, come on, all for flexibility and having an element of this, but it's gone too far. And some people have sort of seen it as a right since the pandemic, when in reality it's something that should only be happening if it's consistent with you doing your job.
And there are some people who work really effectively from home, free of distractions. I mentioned my friend earlier who really doesn't like going into the office and is a real grafter. I mean, this guy really does work very hard, and he is someone who works a lot harder and is a lot more productive at home. But the problem is that there are people who see the loopholes in all of this. I mean, you were a minister in the Home Office during COVID and during the lockdowns and so on. Clearly there were times there when you only needed essential staff. But what kind of conversations did you have with the management of the civil service, the permanent secretary and other senior people within the civil service? I mean, was it a concern for you even then when you were saying, actually, hold on, can these people come in? How do we deal with this properly? You know, I'm not necessarily getting as much out of the Zooms and so on as I would if they were here. Were those kind of conversations you had as a minister, Kevin?
Yes, there were. I can actually think of one meeting I had just after the invasion of Ukraine, by which point, you know, all pubs, bars and everything was still open. You know, the era of COVID worries had subsided quite significantly by that point. I remember we were discussing our crisis response to issues happening in Ukraine and some things. And at the end of a meeting, just looking around and saying, right, there's a comment I want to make. And that's I've got a room full of secretaries and a wall full of senior managers. I expect that to be reversed the next time we have a meeting.
And was it?
It was. Quite a few people suddenly managed to get themselves in the office, discovered that COVID actually wasn't that much of a problem anymore. The only person who didn't was someone who actually genuinely had a medical issue that they were literally, I think, due an operation. Obviously won't name them for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But where actually they could have been signed off sick that day, but had decided, given the situation.
Well, actually, they were working very hard, just happened to be from home.
They couldn't drive, so it wasn't the fact that they weren't just going out to the office. So, okay, flexibility, we're using Zoom, we're keeping them busy. But it was remarkable how many people had thought it was perfectly safe for their secretary to attend the meeting, but they were still a bit worried about
But not them. Is there a way back in all of this? Because work has changed dramatically. The civil service has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. And I just wonder, I mean, I don't want to encourage presenteeism, people coming in at 1 minute to 9, leaving at 1 minute past 5, and they might not even be that productive through that, but accountability is a key issue, especially for taxpayers. Is there a way to get that back, Kevin, or do you think this is just run on in such a way that people will say, actually, hold on, no, I must work from home, or I must have this kind of flexibility that I've had previously?
No, there is a way to get it back. I think certainly we also need to look at how some of our salaries are structured as well. You know, if you're working from home, you don't need a London waiting allowance on your job, things like that. You know, those are the sorts of things.
Well, I read something the other day, sorry to interrupt you, Kevin, but I read something the other day about a job that had a London waiting allowance, and a guy who actually gave his mate a few £100 to take in post for him, because the friend lived in London, he lived up north, and basically if his registered address where his salary went and the documentation from the job went, he could get the London allowance. So there are loads of ways through these things that people are exploiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And in cases like that, you'll always get sometimes people who've engaged in fraud like that, and therefore they potentially should be handed over to prosecution, not just employment sanctions, if that's what they have done to get money that are not due out of the taxpayer. But more widely, it is about how we manage this. I think also having lead from ministers as well. You know, Jacob was certainly doing what he could, mostly not getting too many bits of praise out the trade unions, that was for sure. But sometimes you do need to be clear that at the end of the day, you know, you're not running a sort of charity. You are running a public service that has obligations to people that actually, if it doesn't do its job, can have serious outcomes. So, for example, things like the land registry, tax office, the home office. If things aren't processed, if things aren't dealt with, real people suffer real outcomes because
and that's a very good point, especially when it comes to HMRC, which is not my favourite part of the public service, it must be said. Last year, a report by MPs found that almost 44,000 taxpayers were cut off after being on hold for over an hour with HMRC call handlers. I mean, I wasn't in that category, but I mentioned earlier on that I'd been on hold for 42 minutes. I basically said, hello, my name is, and literally was cut off as a result. And that was an important tax issue that I needed to get sorted. And the message I think it sends is that there are lots of people who run their own businesses, who are, you know, sole traders or have a small business, or people who are grafting and have to be there and are working very, very hard. And actually the people who are meant to, public servant, serve the public, are often not there to lift the phone to have very basic inquiries. And I don't want to go too far down the road of bashing HMRC, but I do wonder a lot of the time whether we're getting value for money, especially when the tax thresholds are being frozen and when the tax burden is the highest it has been as a proportion of what the country makes since the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, you're right to highlight it, Peter. In fact, there's plenty of statistics that show the public sector's productivity, despite all the advances in technology we've seen over recent years, has not advanced in the way the private sector has. You know, there's plenty of companies that have adapted, brought new technology in, and used it to help increase the productivity of their staff. But meanwhile, in the public sector, you know, that hasn't moved on. You know, for example, large parts of the NHS are still using paper files and everything else. All of which brings cost. And yes, ultimately, this comes down to management. What can you do? And also being prepared to fire people who aren't performing. And that's one of the most difficult things to do, actually, in the public sector. It's probably something a government does need to tackle, and it's only right that we do so on taxpayers. But, you know, let's be honest, Peter, it's the sort of thing where we'll certainly see plenty of shroud waving if a future government decides to do that. Because I've got a funny feeling that the current one isn't going to want to take on the trade unions on this one.
I think you may well be right. Kevin, thank you. That's Kevin Foster there, the former Immigration Minister. He was an MP for Torbay. Thanks for joining us this evening. Really interesting to talk about that. Lots of people talking about the innocence of children as well, including including Joanna in Salisbury, says, "Hi, Cardi P." Hi, Joanna. "I had an Angolan student staying with me, and my granddaughter, age 4, hadn't seen many black people. He explained to her he came from a hot country. She was rubbing his arm because it was black. Then the moment you could see she was thinking it out loud. If you live in England a long time, you will become white like us. He thought it was hilarious. Thank goodness," says Joanna. Jess said, "I think aiming at toddlers is ridiculous, but probably really meant to get to their potentially racist parents, since children repeat what they hear at home." Yeah, but Jess, I think that's a fair point, but also they may not necessarily have heard something at home, and maybe you have accountability or retribution against the parents who actually haven't said it. So, you know, kids pick up things from all over the place. Jay says, "Somewhat ironic for Pat McFadden to be talking about the first duty of a leader being to protect the people." And from Staffordshire, Melanie says, "Tony Blair was the king of prime ministers. No one has ever had a landslide victory like him and never will." Well, Keir Starmer's landslide victory of 411 MPs was pretty similar, it must be said, but obviously he hasn't governed in quite the same way. Another person says, "I used to be a mix of hybrid working from home and travelling for work. I'm now constantly working from home. I live alone. It is totally soul destroying, and I'm urgently looking for a new job." Well, that's a really interesting point of it as well. It's not necessarily that person's own choice to work from home. And listen, I hope you find a new job that is fulfilling and you have good colleagues who you can sort of draw some energy from as well. Deborah has been in touch too and says, "I work from home. My contractual hours are 7 hours a day. I start at 7 until 4 p.m. To be honest, I get through triple the workload of my colleagues. I don't take a lunch break. I eat at my desk and make 1 cup of tea during the entire day. When I'm in the office, I get constant interruptions from people who seem to talk more than they work. To me, it feels like an excuse not to get on with the work. I go into the office whenever I'm asked to. Our team isn't front-facing. We're a non-contact team by phone, so working from home doesn't affect the service. I work hard and I don't take advantage." Well, Deborah, good for you, and good for you for doing the right thing. I just worry that many people don't. But for every Deborah and the friend I mentioned earlier on, I think there are some people at least swinging the lead. On toddlers, Cindy's been in touch from Michigan in the United States. Cindy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about this story about trying to find out whether toddlers are racist and reporting them?
Yes, hi Peter, and congratulations on the evening exchange.
Thank you, Cindy.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I wanted to talk to you about this. Toddlers, I think that it's outrageous, and it's introducing actually skin color to kids.
Yeah, and they say all sorts of things, don't they, toddlers, that may not be the most necessarily politically correct. We just had a very good example from Joanna in Salisbury there, and they should be allowed that innocence, shouldn't they? They don't mean to offend, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got another way you could look at it. It's actually trying to get through, like they're actually through the children trying to get at the parents. Because what do children do? They repeat what the parents are saying.
That's true, Cindy. But then, of course, they might repeat something that someone else has said, and maybe those parents are being held accountable for something that the kids say that actually they haven't said to them. I worry about that.
And children often say things that they don't even know what they're saying. They're 3. I know I don't remember what I was talking about at 3.
Yeah.
God knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, indeed. And it is a worry. So it's, that presumably wouldn't happen in the United States, Cindy.
No, it wouldn't. And if it did, parents would be up in arms. I'm 53. I don't have children. My pets are my children. But if I did, you'd see me protesting or down at the school.
Do you think it perhaps brings racism as a thing almost into the conversation before children? I mean, how do you explain to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old what racism actually is? That's a big concept to very young children.
It's huge. It is huge. They don't know. Why introduce something and put it in their brains that, skin color matters, actually. That's what we're telling them.
Yeah, when it shouldn't. Cindy, great points there.
Shouldn't.
Cindy, great points there. Thank you very much for them. Alex in Cardiff says, if you look in Cardiff in front of the castle, we have LGBT flags as zebra crossings. I'm in no way homophobic. I support LGBT rights, but these crossings cost more and guide dogs can't use them. So purely for the safety of blind and their dogs, I don't agree with them. Steve says, everyone's saying Starmer should stay because it would be worse if someone else came in. Does that mean that a Prime Minister should just employ people even more useless than them and he'll be safe in the job? That's dangerous. He needs to be made to pay for the poor job he's done, and the same for who follows. Well, listen, thank you for that. I had a couple of tweets as well, if I can just get them up on my phone here as well, because there are lots of people who've been in touch, including Liz, who says, I'm in a wheelchair. I'm a wheelchair user, she says. If a child asks me, why are you in a wheelchair? I tell them my legs don't work anymore. Children have a curiosity. Why not just tell them instead of calling the police? Liz says, I love to go to work, but I'm disabled due to a stroke and paralysed down my right. Because of the illegal immigrants, I'm feeling that I'm a burden on the state. I don't believe that we should pay for them. Well, Liz, you're not a burden on the state. If you are genuinely disabled, which I've absolutely no doubt you are, Liz, I as a taxpayer, and I'm sure the vast majority of our viewers and listeners have absolutely no problem paying their taxes for you to receive benefits, because disability can be a very, very difficult thing. And I have no problem with disabled people like you receiving those benefits. Doesn't bother me at all. In fact, it's what we should be doing as a society. If there are people who shouldn't be getting benefits, well, then that's an issue. But you're not one of them, Liz, so please don't feel that way. Adam says Starmer is finished, and Steve says, so Starmer could stay because it's worse if someone else came in. Does that mean that a future Prime Minister should just employ people? Oh, I think he texted it in as well, so just reading that one out as well. Lots more to talk about, including airlines set to slash 2 million seats in May due to the soaring cost of jet fuel, and the Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary calling for a ban on the early morning airport pint. What do you think of all that? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Neil Kinnock felt the Labour Party. He changed the Labour Party. He thought he might be the Prime Minister in 92. We didn't win. But he had that feeling for the Labour Party. That doesn't exist with Keir Starmer, I'm afraid. Look, I often say, Jeremy, the Labour Party is the nearest thing I've got to a religion. But if the Labour Party was the Church of England, Keir Starmer would be the chief executive of it.
But he's the God. It means he's your God right now.
Well, he's not the spiritual leader, is my point.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to Mrs. M, who is on Twitter saying it's Starmer causing the instability with his awful decision making. I wonder what you think about that, because Starmer is certainly on the ropes. It's interesting. Tomorrow, of course, we're going into those local elections in many parts of England, many thousands of councillors and many more, tens of thousands of candidates who are hoping for your vote if you live in those areas. Many parts of England, of course. There are projections, certainly from people like Robert Hayward, who is a very, very respected pollster, who's talking about Labour perhaps losing 1,875 seats. It'll be fascinating to see what happens. The Tories, who are certainly thought to be losing maybe about 500 seats. Certainly on Friday evening, we'll talk through all of that. All the results won't be in just yet, but for coverage of the local elections in England, the Scottish parliamentary elections, and indeed the Welsh Assembly elections, stick with talk and we'll bring it to you right through particularly Friday and Saturday as well, and we'll have a full roundup, of course, next Monday too, because there's an awful lot to talk about with all of that. But one thing I want to talk about now is airlines, which may well be axing 2 million seats in May as jet fuel costs soar. There's another story as well around about the Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary calling for a ban on early morning airport drinks as bad behaviour is rising. We'll get to that in a minute. But let me ask Christian Walmer, first the travel writer, who joins me now, about these 2 million seats in the wake of the soaring jet fuel costs. This is the war in the Middle East, of course, the wider impacts of the conflict being felt, notably as we approach the UK half-term school holidays. Christian, I am someone who's hoping to jet away at the tail end of May, not just to Northern Ireland to see my family for a few days, but also on holiday in France. Tell us what there's. I've got some skin in the game here. Tell us what's likely to happen. Christian, are you there?
Well, yeah. Sorry. Yes. I mean, I think that this is, a temporary blip that is not going to affect most people. They're going to cut initially flights that are not very profitable or not very frequent, rather than kind of cutting your trip to Northern Ireland, or indeed mine to Italy in the next couple of weeks. So, 2 million sounds a lot, but there's 100,000 flights worldwide every day.
Yes.
So it's each of which has at least 150 or 200 kind of people in it. So it's not a kind of...
so you don't think it's perhaps... are they just getting the contingencies ready at the moment? Because as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what happens is that you've got to run the flights, because if you don't run them, you lose the slots. So if you have 40% capacity on one flight, you have 40% capacity on another, now the rules mean you could just combine those. But a lot of people, of course, have a sort of military precision in terms of when they get to the airport, who's looking after their cats and dogs or whatever, who's watering their plants, when they've got to leave, when they've got to pick people up, if they've got to stay in an airport hotel the night before or whatever. I mean, those plans, and when people get off work as well, those plans may be put in jeopardy, in theory, by a lot of this, Christian.
Yes, I mean, obviously, there's going to be an impact on a few people, but I mean, I'm just kind of talking to people in the industry. There is a huge amount of fuel available, and this is probably going to affect 3 or 5% of world kind of supplies. So it would be very unlikely that most flights are going to be affected. It's going to be a marginal effect on a few across the world.
What would you say to people who are worried about this? Should they worry, or should they just think, look, the likelihood is 95 to 97% chance that everything will be fine and the flights will go as expected?
Panic is a great problem. It's often more of a problem than the underlying issues. So, the fact is that, very few people are going to be affected so far. Now, if this goes on for a long time, it may have, a wider effect. But as I stress, this is only a small percentage of the world's supplies. They can get the oil refineries to produce more jet fuel rather than other types of fuel. They can kind of call on their reserves and so on. So this is not going to ground the aviation industry.
Maybe I can ask you about the boss of Ryanair, the very colourful character that is Michael O'Leary. He is talking about bad behaviour on board and saying that his airline is having to divert an average of nearly one flight a day because of bad behaviour, up from one a week 10 years ago. He's saying people are drinking far too much before they're going on those flights. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, Michael O'Leary, as you know, is a man who likes publicity, doesn't he?
He certainly does.
And this is a typical Ryanair kind of attempt to divert from the problem that we've just been discussing, to talk about, a problem that might affect one flight a day. They have literally hundreds of flights a day. It's not a kind of pressing problem. And I don't think that his idea of banning early drinking is going to make much of a difference.
He said airports should be banned from serving alcohol to passengers before early flights in order to reduce the number of disruptive passengers on planes. I mean, if you're having a few early pints, which to me strikes me as basically a British tradition, and I speak as a non-drinker, I mean that's part of the holiday, is it not? It's like it's 5:30 in the morning at Gatwick or at Manchester. I will now have a pint of beer.
Yes, I mean, I've got a friend who's a heavy-duty alcoholic, and he certainly has his Guinness, and that might point to what nationality he is. He has his Guinness kind of at 6 o'clock in the morning when he arrives for early flights. He doesn't then disrupt the airline, but he's that sort of traveller. Look, this is not a major issue, and again, it's Michael O'Leary kind of seeking, to get Ryanair's name in the headlines.
Do you think it might have some merit on particular routes? I mean, if you're going on a lads holiday to Ibiza, for example, is that is possibly more likely to have a few tanked up men or indeed women than if you're going to, I don't know, Nice?
Yes, I think that's right. But hey, this is not going to happen. They're not going to stop people from drinking in advance. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be a thing. It's a little publicity stunt. But, I hope people keep on enjoying their early morning pints. It's probably one of the few chances they get of having one.
Okay. Thank you. That's Christian Walmar there. He's a travel writer. Appreciate him joining us on the programme this evening. What do you think, particularly on the pints aspect of thing, or having a drink on the plane or just beforehand, before you go on your holiday? And the thing is that, I mean, there are a lot of people, like Christian, for example, like me. I go home to Northern Ireland every now and again, and I probably fly a bit more than some people do. But I would say the majority of people are only really going on one big holiday per year. It's the thing that you've saved up for, aside from maybe your mortgage. It's probably the biggest spend that you have, the most expensive thing that most people have. 10 days, 2 weeks, a week, whatever it is. And, the small luxuries of saying, right, I'm actually getting there, got up at stupid o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock or whatever, you're finally there, you've checked in all the bags. Actually, we're sitting in the departure lounge, you've got an hour to go before they're going to, call the flight. What's wrong with having a pint? Or actually, should people be more responsible? I'd be really, really interested to hear from people's views on this. I don't drink alcohol, as you may know. I haven't had a drink in 8 years, but I'm not a purist on this. I'm not a killjoy. I'm not someone who says that people shouldn't have alcohol if they can't enjoy it responsibly and just have a laugh on their holiday, certainly, as well, which is what it's about. It's about letting go. It's about having a bit of fun. So what do you think of all of that? So much to discuss. 0344 499 1000. We're going to go to Joe Wheeler in a minute or two, who you may know as the commentator on the debate desk. She's someone who is a professional weather forecaster as well. Joe has so many strings to her bow, and one of them was that as a reporter, she was one of the first people on the scene when Madeleine McCann went missing. The anniversary of that was a couple of days ago, and now we're told that the suspect in the abduction and murder of, perhaps, of Madeleine McCann, of course we don't know the full facts of that, Christian Bruckner, who's a nasty piece of work, he can't be extradited to the UK thanks to Brexit. We'll talk to Joe about that in a second, and we'll get your calls, text, tweets and voice notes. Tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very interesting one in that Keir Starmer has sent an email to all civil servants thanking them for their service. He's talked as well about how they've had his confidence, his support and his respect. This is on the eve, of course, of local elections. He said in the final paragraph, "The service you give to this country matters. My confidence in the integrity and dedication of the civil service remains absolute. We have a huge job to do for the British people and we will do it together." Just an interesting one that he's sending that this evening on the eve of those local elections, and particularly with his own position, which is in jeopardy, certainly. We also have some news about 2 British people self-isolating at home in the UK after potential exposure to the hantavirus on the cruise ship struck by an outbreak. This is according to the UK Health Security Agency. They were on the MV Hondias, I think is how you pronounce it, cruise ship, but left the vessel earlier in its journey and did not have symptoms. They left the cruise ship at St Helena, the British island of St Helena, where it docked between the 22nd and 24th of April and flew back to the UK via Johannesburg. The pair then contacted health officials when they heard of the cases on the ship. The Health Security Agency here in the UK said their contacts on the journey home are being traced, which is what happens when you have a contagious disease. I remember when I had salmonella. If I can give you one tip in life, it is this: don't get salmonella. Everybody I'd spoken to and dealt with over the course of those few days that I was infectious was contacted. And the MV Hondias, it's interesting, MV stands for motor vehicle, honestly. SS steamship and HMS His Majesty's ship and all the rest of it. MV Hondias, MV stands for motor vehicle, which is a sort of curious aspect of that. Dawn in Chelmsford says, "During my career in local government, I went on courses dedicated to team building. I also lectured on the subject. Home working weakens the sense of belonging," says Dawn. Well, thank you for that, Dawn. Appreciate that, and very interesting to get your experience. Also, Mary in County Down has been in touch and says, "You are the man least likely to go on a lads holiday, Peter. More chaps. So there we are. I don't know, I've never been to lads holiday, it must be said. I did go on a stag do to Berlin once, and it was my first and I think only experience of a strip club. I emerged with glitter on my face, and that's all I'm saying, especially at 20 to 9 in the evening. Now then, let's talk about the suspect in the Madeleine McCann case not being extradited to the UK due to Brexit, we're told. This is Christian Bruckner. Joe Wheeler, who is many strings to her bow, expert on the weather, political commentator, celebrant of weddings and funerals, and indeed a reporter in her previous life. She was first on the scene of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. That was a number of years ago, Joe, and you followed the case very, very, very closely ever since. What do you make of this latest development, or more accurately, lack of development?
Well, as you say, 19 years now, and it remains the one event that overshadowed my life and my children's lives, because it changed everything. We had gone to Portugal to live life in paradise, and it was absolutely beautiful. You know, we were renovating a villa. The doors were open at night. We had 2 big dogs, and life was beautiful. It was carefree. And then suddenly Maddie went missing. And at that point, everybody, not just us, everybody started to question everything. It changed life completely. And of course, we sat under the cloud of the fact that somebody had come in and taken a child. And we still don't know whether that happened or whether it didn't happen. We don't know what happened to Maddie. But this Christian Bruckner thing, this came about relatively recently, and I have to say I was really surprised to find out that he was actually living in a house next door to my best friend.
Wow.
With whom I used to go riding every day.
I mean, that's chilling, isn't it?
That's what, sorry?
It's chilling, knowing what he has done and has been convicted of.
Completely. We rode past this house every single day, and my friend used to make her horse ride up onto the sun deck and down again. I said, no, I'm not doing that. And eventually she had to clear out the house after he'd gone. And at the point when Madeleine went missing, he wasn't living there. He still had connections to the Algarve. You know, his phone was registered close to the Algarve, but not precisely in that area. And there was actually nothing to connect him to Madeleine's abduction.
So even though he's clearly an absolute wrong-un and is a very, very dodgy, horrible person and has been convicted of all sorts of horrible things, it is unlikely in your estimation that he had anything to do with Madeleine McCann. Is that a fair characterisation?
That is exactly what I'd say. There is nothing forensically to link him to this. It is only circumstantial. And at the time he was driving a very distinctive, either a VW camper or I think a Jaguar, which was later re-registered in Germany, but these were both distinctive cars. And locals, such as I was at the time, we would have noticed.
Yeah. I wonder more generally, do we focus too much on Madeleine McCann? There were other children who went missing around the same time who we really don't devote very much airtime or thought to. This is, as you say, nearly 2 decades on, and still we're in a situation where we still don't really know what happened that night.
I think that's very true. I mean, if you look back at the situation of Ben Needham, who went missing, many, many years ago, and there was a potential answer to what happened to him, with him. But many children go missing each year, incredibly sadly. And the fact that so much time, energy, money, resources has been poured into this is extraordinary. At the time, living in Portugal, the Portuguese police came round, they searched our house. We know that they were probably monitoring our telephones. Well, I do know that. That they were searching that ribbon development close to the seafront because, of course, in May, not all the people who own villas there would have been in residence. All these properties were being searched. But right behind the A22, which is the main road that runs through the Algarve, is utter wilderness. I had a friend who came off her horse and the horse bolted. They never found the horse again, or more to the point, when they did, it had died. She made her way home, which is good. But that's just how wild it is behind there.
Yeah.
So anything behind that road is unlikely to be found. And the Boragem, where the police believe they found some kind of shrine belonging to Bruckner, because he was known for spending time there. Was it a shrine? What was it? They dredged it. They'd sent divers down. They found nothing. It's very, very hard to say. But the expanse of wild land there is huge.
We also have full-time salaried officers in the Metropolitan Police who are still looking into this. I mean, is there a time that you think we simply say, look, we don't know, we're not going to know, and maybe it's time to move on to other crimes?
I had been back in England and moved twice before the police eventually found me again and said, can we talk about the telephone calls you made at the time? Because I was using both a Portuguese mobile and an English mobile. My children, 3 of my children were back here at the time in boarding school. So I was using both phones. So they were still on it. They were still going through the data, still going through the evidence, trying to find out as much as they could. And obviously, I've cooperated as much as I could. But yes, the investigation goes on, and it's baffling because there are certain things which would be relatively easy to look at. A second look at the DNA that was found in the back of the car would be useful if somebody could finesse it. And let's face it, over the years, the ability to identify DNA has increased and increased because it was a relatively new technology. The witness statements from the dogs, if that's what you can call them, all those things could be re-examined and questions asked.
Yeah. Listen, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting to hear from you. That is Jo Wheeler, their broadcaster, and was a reporter on the scene of the original disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Very, very interesting to hear from her. Ray has been in touch. Thank you, Ray, on Twitter, who has very kindly corrected me. And listen, it's a 3-hour show. I'm going to make mistakes every now and again, so thank you for that. In shipping and maritime terminology, MV is not motor vehicle, it's motor vessel. So thank you very much indeed for that. And I'm very happy to correct the record there. And Ray, thank you for that. Michelle says, I thought airlines didn't allow people on aircraft if they were intoxicated. If they are more strict on this, if they're stricter on this, but didn't serve alcohol on board, then passengers could enjoy a drink or two before boarding and wouldn't end up drunk. Airlines should take some responsibility for allowing this to happen. I suppose the question is, how can you work it out, and also different people can take different amounts of alcohol before they are tanked up. Certainly, we'll talk about this in a minute or two. I know we've some callers who want to get on the air to talk about this. Whatever it is on the tip of your tongue. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 10 o'clock, so stay with us here on Talk.
Is Starmer fueling anti-Semitism?
I don't think he's doing anything to deal with anti-Semitism. The attempt to gaslight the British people and the Jewish community is appalling.
This has to stop. It's almost being normalised, and it's terrifying, and we're sick of it. Enough's enough.
Don't be shocked, and don't you bloody dare claim to be shocked or upset or care about Jewish people being stabbed on the streets of our capital city in broad daylight. This is on you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Derek is in Preston and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Derek, someone told me you're a former civil servant yourself, is that right?
Yeah, I retired at the 31st of December. I worked for 38 years for HMRC.
And you will have seen in the last 5 years or so how things have changed, or maybe 'twas ever thus. What do you think of this criticism of HMRC?
No, I think it all changed basically with COVID, and people were allowed to work from home. To be honest, I couldn't stand working at home. I spent 2 weeks at home during COVID, and I got classed as a critical worker, and I went back to work. I just couldn't stand it. But it got to the point where I had staff that would ring me up and say, "I've got a doctor's appointment. Can I work from home? I've got a parcel being delivered. Can I work from home?" And it got to the stage where I'm saying, "No, go into work." Honestly, I had a member of staff that worked. She literally worked in the centre of Manchester with 10 minutes walk away from work, and she wanted to stay at home all the time. As soon as COVID happened, that was it. It was just unbelievable.
Could your workers, Derek, could they do the same job or a very similar job from home as they did in the office?
No. The thing, I worked in investigation, so I basically went out arresting people and interviewing people. I couldn't do that from home.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable.
And when people asked you and when they made those kind of requests, Derek, when they said of a parcel coming, kind of work from home today, I mean, you must have just raised your eyes to the heavens. But did your managers back you up?
No. The thing was, my manager. Right, I'll tell you a story. I won't name him or anything like that, but he had a season ticket for a football team. If he went to the game on a Sunday night, he wouldn't go into work on the Monday.
Right, he'd work from home
midweek on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Because I knew, because he'd had too much to drink, and he would say, "I'm going to work from home."
Yeah,
and that is basically that was it. Effectively, I know people now that work for local councils that are living in France and Spain, basically working from France and Spain.
Yeah. And there'll be people.
All you need to do is just log on, and that's it. I mean, I had a works computer at home, and I could log on, and I could pretend to work all day. Mm-hmm. All I need to do was just turn the computer on. I didn't need to do anything, to be honest.
And something like HMRC, which, I'm sure you weren't necessarily the world's most popular person when you introduced yourself as somebody who worked in HMRC investigations.
I was a VAT officer, which obviously was pretty unpopular, and then I was an investigator. I prosecuted people for drug smuggling, VAT, you name it. I basically
certainly. But we expect. I mean,
I was the most unpopular person in my family.
But you did. Join the club, Derek. But you clearly did a lot of really important work. And the thing with HMRC is, I paid a VAT bill yesterday, for example, and I want to know that HMRC is using that money correctly. But if there are people,
unfortunately, this government are not, are they? Let's face it. I mean. It's just terrible. Oh, well, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, I've been watching it today, is Zach Polanski is saying he's going to legalise heroin.
Yeah.
Well, where's he going to buy heroin from? Because any country cannot buy heroin from anywhere.
Well, the other thing within that, Derek, is he wants to legalise all drugs. And I would love someone to ask him, and I haven't heard anybody asking this, does that include date rape drugs? Does that include these drugs where you put them in people's drinks and you rape people?
The main country now that produces heroin is Myanmar. Mm-hmm. It used to be Afghanistan. It's not anymore. But no country can buy heroin. It's just going to be a legitimate purpose for smugglers. It's the same as banning people from smoking cigarettes under the age of 18. It's just a smuggler's charter at the end of the day.
You make some really good points there, Derek, and thanks for your insight to HMRC as well. I'm not down on civil servants. I worked with a lot of really, really good civil servants. I've interacted with many, many good civil servants since leaving working with the civil service. As a journalist, I interact with sometimes very good civil servants, but there are clearly a large number who are not doing what they're meant to do, and Derek has given us his perspective on that. Lee says, my smarmy brother-in-law was a civil servant at Border Force and was always playing golf. He reckons he was on flexi time, says Lee. Another big issue tonight about drinking in airports, and the head of Ryanair, Michael O'Leary, says that he thinks that shouldn't happen. And Brian has been in touch, says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Brian. The reason people drink in the airport is because it's so expensive to drink on the planes. Pretty expensive in the airport too, I suppose, although there are some cheaper places to go, I suppose, depending on the airport, of course. Michelle says, I thought airlines didn't allow people on aircraft if they were intoxicated. Let's speak to Steve in Frome about this. Steve, you're very welcome to the programme. I think it's the first time you've given us a ring, actually.
Yes, it is, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. What do you think?
Well, as a frequent flyer, I think it's typical O'Leary, really, blaming the bars for their licensing hours. Him on is £1.1 billion a year. Thinking that, yes, of course, it's aimed at teenagers and stag do's and all that kind of stuff, hen do's, which we see. But any decent airline should be able to police that themselves. And know that they got all this gang of 18, 20-year-olds coming on board, going to Prague or Amsterdam or wherever, they should be able to control them. And any as a frequent flyer, which I am, any decent airline I've been on that go to these places have controlled them them well, made sure that their drinking is curbed. Look, you're drunk, or you can't get on if you're too drunk.
Yeah.
But it's what really annoys me as being a frequent flyer with this is that one man's 6 o'clock could be another man's 10 o'clock, or woman's 10 o'clock.
Well,
you know? So
also,
like,
it's the amount of alcohol you can take as well. So some people to have a pint, if I had a pint of beer right now, I haven't had a drink in 8 years, if I had a pint of beer right now, I'd be pretty drunk pretty quickly. I mean, the airports, they're making the money from the pubs as well. Isn't it maybe the airport's responsibility rather than the airlines?
Well, is it the airport's responsibility or the airlines? You know, I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? I think they should be working together on this. I think if they're, you know, allowing the bars and licensed hours to be flexible so that you can drink at 5, 6 in the morning, you know, for sensible people, that is, you know, then I don't see a problem with it myself, you know, because like I said to you, it's not always somebody 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if you've got off a 10-hour, 13-hour flight, you're on a completely different time zone.
Yes.
Let's ban hot toddies at night time then.
So what do you do, Steve? How do you approach it from an alcohol-based level?
Well, I'm pretty similar to you, really, Peter. I don't drink much, only on birthdays, Christmas, and you know, events. But if I do fancy one, I'll have one. You know, but it's not like something that in my teenage years I used to do, of course. You know, but now as you get older, you just learn to just drink when you fancy one.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not something that I take lightly. You know, some people do have problems with it, but you know, from an airport point of view, if you're going on a stag do or a hen do, and you want to have fun, then yeah, go and have fun. But the airline then should be responsible for that passenger.
And those people have to be responsible themselves. Steve, listen, it's lovely to talk to you, and thanks for your call. First call, I hope it's not the last one. Thanks also to Tad, who's been in touch from Cambridge, and he says, I well recall something a former and much respected Chancellor once said, in the future jobs won't be so much low tech as no tech. I think he was right, but what that means for the population is not clear. It could prove disastrous for overall order and equality. So lots of thinking to do and working from home and where things are. Whatever your thoughts are on all these big matters and what Steve was saying there about alcohol in airports and on flights and so on, whether it's about we're talking about Madeleine McCann, we're talking about Starmer's career and Polanski and all the rest of it, whatever you think, I'd love to hear from you in the last hour. We have a bit more time for calls in the last hour, and it's always good to get as many callers on as possible, like Steve and like everybody else, like Derek and everybody else we've been talking to this evening. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We're going to speak to David Whitting in just a second. He's the former editor of the Sunday Express, about all the politics of the day. Zach Polanski, the civil service, and their working from home scandal. Also Keir Starmer and his durability, especially with the local elections tomorrow. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 9 o'clock. Thank you so much for your company here on the Evening Exchange. Lots to talk about this evening, whether it is alcohol when you're about to get on a plane, whether it is the future of Keir Starmer, and indeed Zach Polanski as well. Big day tomorrow, local elections in England. I'll be using my vote, and in Scotland for the parliamentary Scottish Parliament elections and Welsh Assembly elections too. We're also going to speak this hour about what you want to talk about: anti-Semitism, Sharia law. There are people who want to get on whether toddlers are racist. This is someone who's talking about a racist dog as well. We'll talk about that when we get that caller on the line. We will also talk about a really interesting new book, actually, about the women of Nuremberg, those trials that give justice at the end of the Holocaust and at the end of the Second World War. So there's a lot to discuss with that author who's joining us this evening. We'll talk about Zach Polanski, as I say. We'll do that in a second. We'll get your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes on absolutely everything that you want to say between now and 10 o'clock. There's a bit more time for calls in the 9 o'clock hour, so if you've been hesitating, if you're thinking, will I give him a ring, will I not? Now's the time. Pick up the phone. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 722 with the words talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on the Evening Exchange. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, is under more pressure. Front page of the Daily Mail today, talking about 30 Green candidates probed over anti-Semitism. That's what they've been looking into. A number of other papers have as well. The paper says the millions of middle-class voters gulled by Polanski's cuddly rhetoric need to understand is guaranteed to end in penury, misery and despotism. Well, there are some of the things that some of those candidates have been saying. Some have been suspended. Some have even been arrested, actually. Very, very concerning. Polanski himself, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I think he's just a bit of an idiot. I think he is I'm not excusing anything he says, I'm not letting him off the hook in any way, but I think he is not in control of the Green Party. I think the Islamists are in control of the Green Party. I think he's a useful idiot as someone who is Jewish, who is nonetheless not standing up, in my strongly held personal belief, to many in the Green Party for the anti-Semitism that they're clearly showing. He has been criticised for many things, including telling lies, giving false information about his own CV as well. Where have we heard that before, Rachel Reeves? And indeed, on the Radio 4 Today programme this morning, Nick Robinson, the presenter, asked him about the false claims, particularly one about being a spokesman for the British Red Cross.
You've made a series of false or disputed claims about jobs you've had in the past. Why, for example, did you say you were a spokesperson for the British Red Cross when they are absolutely clear that, though a supporter of theirs, you were never a spokesperson for them?
So I hosted various fundraisers for the British Red Cross, and indeed I would go on stage and speak for them about the amazing work they do tackling humanitarian crises, on the climate crisis, and indeed for refugees all around the world. I use the wrong word, and I accept that. It's important, though, and I accept this, that they don't support any political party, and I've made sure that's been taken down.
You've made
Interestingly, on the anti-Semitism aspect of things as well, there were, of course, major problems in the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, who I strongly believe, in my personal view, is an anti-Semite himself. He would deny that, of course. But Pat McFadden, who is the Welfare Secretary, was asked about this, not just in Labour, but particularly in the Greens this morning, and asked about Polanski, his leadership, what he says, what he does, and what he thinks. This was on Times Radio this morning. The interviewer was Kate McCann.
Do you think the party has a problem with anti-Semitism? I mean, are these the same people who were expelled from the Labour Party in the Corbyn years, after the Corbyn years?
Yes, some of them are. Look, I think last week when we saw that attack on Jewish people in Golders Green, the response to that is a test of leadership. Now, it's one thing to run on vibes, but when you get more scrutiny, what you really stand for matters. And his instincts at that moment was to stick up for the person holding the knife, not for the police officers trying to stop the person holding the knife. I think that's revealing. I think it speaks volumes. Not for nothing do we say your first duty as a political leader is to protect the public. He failed that duty last week, and he would also fail it in a wider sense with policies to leave NATO, to ask US bases to leave. We simply cannot, in this uncertain world, abandon the duty to protect the public.
Pat McFadden speaking there, the Work and Pensions Secretary, speaking to Times Radio, our sister station, this morning. David Wooding is with us now, the former editor of the Sunday Express, long-time veteran of Westminster politics and reporting on it for a number of different newspapers. David, good evening.
Good evening, Peter.
Where is Polanski right now, do you think? We've seen his approval ratings personally fall, but the Greens are certainly likely to do pretty well in the local Scottish and indeed Welsh elections tomorrow.
The Greens are doing really well, partly out of the failure of both the Conservatives over the past 14 years and now the Labour Party in under 2 years, who have been just as bad, if not worse, than what the Conservatives were. And people are feeling, well, they're all the same, we need to go somewhere else. Hence why Reform are doing well, and those who are on the left are moving towards the Greens. But the problem is, you see it on social media, some people saying, I've voted Labour all my life, I'm going to vote Green because I've always cared about the environment. But the problem is, this Green Party under Zach Polanski is not even mentioned environmental issues. They've been appealing, and I think on purpose, to extreme Islamists and the hard left Corbynista wing of the Labour Party, knowing that these people need a home and they can lap them all up.
What do you make of Zach Polanski himself? Because my view, and this may be totally wrong, but my view is he's just a bit of an idiot. He doesn't realise how dangerous many people are in that party, or maybe he does realise it and he just is powerless to do anything about it. I think he's useful for them because there are so many Islamists who have entered the Green Party. It's become very popular, and I think as soon as they're done with him, they'll get rid of him. What's your thought on that?
Well, a buffoon he may well be, Peter, and I tend to share that view to some extent. But I believe it's worse than that. He's a dangerous buffoon. And if he gets his hands anywhere near the levers of power, God help us all. If you scratch the surface, even beyond this anti-Semitism, you see things like he wants to legalise hard drugs, legalise prostitution, send taxes sky high, outlaw horse racing. I mean, it goes on. It would really be a shocking development if he got his hands. He wants to do away with our trident nuclear deterrent. He wants to cut the armed forces, open the borders for mass migration. I mean, it goes on. So it would be the country would be absolutely and utterly ruined if he had got anywhere near power.
Yeah, and he's not the only leader who is having serious problems. Certainly the Prime Minister, the Telegraph is reporting, saying that the unions have turned on him. We'll do more on that in just a second. But I wonder if we can talk about Starmer's longevity, David, because certainly the vultures are circling.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear now, Peter, that he's not going to make it to lead Labour into the next general election in 2029. That is not going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if. And the issue now is what happens in the local elections tomorrow. If, as is predicted, he loses 1,800, 1,900 seats, then all those councillors who've been kicked out, all the local workers, grassroots of the Labour Party all over the country will feel massively disappointed, massively disaffected, not to mention the people in government and backbench MPs of the Labour Party who will be saying, well, our days are numbered now. There's no way we can win the next election with Keir Starmer at the helm. And that's why movements will be made after that.
It's really interesting in the Telegraph tomorrow that they have a headline, unions turn on Starmer ahead of election rout. PM needs to go, says General Secretary, as Labour heads for disaster at the poll. This is an unnamed union leader supporting the Labour Party but not supporting Keir Starmer. So clearly there are problems not just from fellow politicians, not just from MPs, but actually from many supporters of Keir Starmer as well, David.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the past few months, we've had private briefings from Labour MPs, in fact, Labour ministers as well, saying he's got to go eventually, and it's just a case of how they're going to do it. And I think, you know, in the Labour movement generally, they realise that Keir Starmer is not a winner. Mm-hmm. He's not. He won the last election probably by default because the Conservatives have made such a mess of it all by changing leadership so many times. We saw so many disasters that they had to go, and as a result, he got in by default. Now, of course, when it comes to actually governing, he doesn't seem to have a vision or a plan for government. And that's the way people are seeing it at the moment.
Yeah, there's a woman called Andrea Egan, who's the new General Secretary of Unison, calling herself a fan of Andy Burnham. Another leader said that the government is just not good enough. And indeed, Andrea Egan, who's the General Secretary of Unison, who's the one who says that she's a fan of Andy Burnham, criticised attempts about Andy Burnham becoming an MP. We've heard from Lucy Powell as well. She spoke to Sky News. Actually, let's play that clip. Lucy Powell, who's the deputy leader of the Labour Party, spoke to Sky News a little bit earlier on today. She spoke to their political editor Beth Rigby about Andy Burnham and about Keir Starmer as well. Let's have a look at this.
We've needed to be set out a clearer sense of direction and a clearer purpose. I think we've started to see that coming through, and I'm pleased about that. But you know, these elections are coming round faster than that.
What I'm getting to is that you keep saying we, but isn't it that people are really upset with Keir Starmer?
Look, Keir is the leader of the Labour Party, so of course he gets the most stick of everybody. There's no question of that.
Well, he makes the decisions.
And he doesn't make all the decisions, but obviously he takes full responsibility for the decisions of the Labour Party and of the government. And he's been the first to admit where he has made mistakes, whether it was the appointment of Peter Mandelson, whether it was around the winter fuel payments. You know, that's still an issue sometimes on the doorstep with pensioners as well.
But do you think he is the right leader to lead this change agenda?
Yes.
And just finally then, Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester Mayor, would you like to see him back in Parliament? I know that you supported him to stand in the Gorton and Denton by-election.
Yeah, I would.
You would like him back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Andy is an incredibly popular, relatable and effective politician. So if Andy wants to come back to Parliament, I will continue to support him.
Lucy Powell speaking to Sky News. It's interesting as well, David, about Kemi Badenoch, because she's refused to rule out a local reform deal. And it's interesting with Reform UK because they, of course, have lots of former Conservatives in there. And we're just going to play a clip now of Kemi Badenoch earlier, speaking to Sky News, failing to rule out local deals. Let's see what the leader of the Conservatives has said.
Last year, we had lots of elections where Reform won many councils. How many of them are being run with Conservatives? 0. So we have proof. We are willing to work with people who will help deliver Conservative policies.
I mean, you know as well as I do, David, in fact far better, that in local government often you've got to form coalitions, work with people, have minority administrations. There are lots of different ways, but I wonder, in your view, how much people will be looking at Reform UK's record going into this election and more broadly in the general election, because they've said, for example, they want to reduce local taxation, reduce council tax, but that's often proved very difficult.
Absolutely, and they're realising, like Keir Starmer has, the difficulty of leading, for being in charge, having the levers of power. But I think what's dawning on on Nigel Farage and now on Kemi Badenoch is that they may not have no option but to do a deal together. They may detest each other politically and feel that they don't want to get into bed together. But nevertheless, if we have a situation whereby Reform is the biggest party but not able to form a government without the backing of the Conservatives, and the other option is for a coalition of Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, Scottish nationalists and Welsh nationalists, then for the sake of the country, they would feel they had to do that.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I just wonder on this story in the Telegraph about civil servants as well, David, many of them working from home for up to 3 years in some cases. What do you make of this? Because there is a real worry about civil service delivery. There are many good civil servants. I know many of them, worked with many of them previously, but there are quite a few who are swinging the lead, certainly.
Absolutely. In HMRC, the tax man, as it were, there are 4,500 people who haven't been in the office for 6 months or more. And there's about 1,000 who haven't been there between 1 and 2 years. And there are hundreds of them who've never been in the office for over 2 years and don't even see their colleagues. And this is going to be, flexible working. What if you haven't had your passport? You're still waiting for your passport to be delivered.
Yeah.
Or you're ringing the HMRC line to try and get some help with your tax affairs and nobody's answering the phone. Those people are not going to be very happy about this. And I think Jacob Rees-Mogg, it was, when he was in government, was constantly pointing this out. I remember when I was a political editor, we did a bit of an investigation soon after COVID. We went round, we got some insiders to go around the offices and take some pictures. And there's rows upon rows upon rows of empty desks and computer screens switched off, nobody there. So these buildings are prime estate in the middle of London. They could be rented out and making millions to cut taxes.
Yeah, for the taxpayer, yeah.
We're paying all the heating and all of the bills on these buildings, and everyone's sitting at home. And as you know, when you're at home, who knows what you're doing? The stories about drive-by logins, where people turn up in the car park, log onto the computer system, and then drive home. We're paying their wages. Our taxes are paying for these people.
It is outrageous. Listen, thank you, David Wooding, there, former editor of the Sunday Express. Always good to have you on the programme. Thanks to Leslie as well. He says Pat McFadden, along with Starmer and others, all sat alongside Corbyn when anti-Semitism flourished within the Labour Party, and they said nothing. Well, Leslie, I don't really agree with Pat McFadden on many things. I've clashed with him. I've interviewed him on a number of occasions as well. But I'm going to slightly stand up for Pat McFadden, actually. I think more so than I would stand up for Keir Starmer, because during Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party for 5 years, Pat McFadden was actually quite a vocal critic of the party's handling of anti-Semitism. He called for tougher action, urged a change in culture. He criticised the leadership's response to reports on the issue. I'm just reading a quote from him here in 2019 saying anti-Semitism had no place in the Labour Party, calling for the party to rebuild the trust with the Jewish community. He said Jeremy Corbyn had to take a critical report on anti-Semitism very seriously in 2016. Stating the party should not use its anti-racism record as a shield to deny the existence of anti-Semitism within its ranks. So I do think there were a variety of responses to Jeremy Corbyn, who massively mishandled anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. I think Pat McFadden is actually one of those people we can maybe give a bit of praise to. Leslie, you may disagree, and that's fine, because on my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable. We're going to take some calls in a second, but just before we go to the break, I just want to hear from Peter, who sent a voice note in on Polanski.
Now, if I was to take up a job and say people I'm a qualified hypnotist when I wasn't, and then try to, tell these people I can hypnotise them into making a body part larger when you obviously couldn't, and if I charged for these sessions, would I not be up in court for fraud and deception? Because, that sounds very much like this. So calls that Polanski's credibility into question very, very greatly, doesn't it?
Very good points, Peter. I think his credibility is is being contested for many, many reasons, not just the ones you point out, but many others as well. So if you have thoughts on that, please do let me know what you think of what Peter said there. 0344 499 1000. We'll come to some calls in just a second, and we still will be speaking in a few minutes' time to a woman who's written a fascinating book about the women of Nuremberg. Let us know what you think about whatever the topics are, whatever topic is on the tip of your tongue. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
this done fueling anti-Semitism?
I don't think he's doing anything to deal with anti-Semitism. The attempt to gaslight the British people and the Jewish community is appalling.
This has to stop. It's almost being normalised, and it's terrifying, and we're sick of it. Enough's enough.
Don't be shocked, and don't you bloody dare claim to be shocked or upset or care about Jewish people being stabbed on the streets of our capital city in broad daylight. This is on you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Daniel's in Shropshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Daniel, you have some thoughts on racist toddlers?
Yeah, this article is actually far darker than most people realise. Because you're actually reading the article, it says that teachers are supposed to teach children about white privilege, and that teachers must enforce anti-racism doctrines. Now, these are both dogmas of critical race theory, and schools are not supposed to teach white privilege.
I totally get you on white privilege. I think it's a load of rubbish. But what's wrong with teaching anti-racism?
Because anti-racism does not mean not being a racist. It hasn't for years. During Black Lives Matter, anti-racism was redefined by a neo-Marxist by the name of Ibram X. Kendi in his book How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is explicitly cited in the government's own anti-racism, shall we say, guidance.
Okay.
So in his words, in that book, he said that the only remedy for racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination, and he advocated for race-conscious policies such as affirmative action, or in other words, positive discrimination, and resource allocation. So anti-racism does not mean not being a racist. It literally means race communism.
What would you do if 3-year-old, someone's texting me in about their daughter who's older than this now, but aged about 3, was standing in a queue one time about to board a flight, stared at a black woman and said, "Mummy, that lady has a chocolate face." What would you say to that 3-year-old? How would you deal with that, Daniel?
I'd do exactly what my dad did, because I kind of did the same thing when I was in nursery. He pulled me aside, he said, "You can't say that, there's lots of different people in the world," and I never did it again. It's as simple as that. You don't need to call the police on them.
And do you think the teachers will take a common sense approach to this? Because
of course not.
The guidance they're being given doesn't strike me as common sense from what you're telling me, Daniel.
Of course not. I mean, you take the concept of white privilege. I mean, some people do not understand white privilege. And I'll just quickly explain what it is. White privilege was created in the 90s by a woman called Cheryl Harris, who essentially came up with this idea that all white people are born with a form of property that grants them privileges in life, societal advantages. That is what white privilege means. So and that connects to anti-racism when I say it's race communism, because Ibram X. Kendi literally advocated for policies to redistribute white privilege to oppressed and marginalized groups. So white privilege literally means a form of status property.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on white privilege. I think it's a load of rubbish, and I think that it's actually quite sinister in terms of what its role is and how it's being used. Daniel, listen, thanks for your thoughts on that. Laura Jane is in Hampshire and has told us she once had a racist dog. Laura Jane?
Yes, normally I call you about serious subjects, but this is a bit more facetious. I genuinely did have a racist dog.
Right.
Whenever my
how was the dog racist?
because when my son's piano teacher used to come in, and she was the most talented, is the most wonderful, talented black piano teacher, he would really kick off. And I thought it was just so embarrassing because, you know, she was almost like a member of the family. But every time she came in, he would kick off.
How did you know it was because of the colour of her skin?
Because the same thing would happen if we were walking down the street. At that time, I lived in London, in Battersea, and if anybody came towards us who was black, we had the same trouble. And it was. How
do you manage that as a dog owner, Laura Jane? Because it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
It is embarrassing, and just like a toddler, you know, you can't reason with a toddler, and you can't reason with a dog, and so I would apologise. Luckily, our piano teacher thought it was hysterical, and she was a dog owner too. But yes. People in the street, it also could get quite, you know, difficult if it was a younger person, and they took offence. So yes. I would always apologise and then walk on quickly, or pick up Albert, as he was called.
That's fascinating. And is Albert still with you, Laura Jane?
No, very sadly, he was run over when he was very young.
Oh, that's very sad.
But I have four wonderful. Well, they don't seem to be racist at all.
Good. Well, I'm glad they are more enlightened, perhaps. Laura Jane,
yes,
very interesting to hear from you on that particular issue. Thank you. More coming in about Starmer writing to civil servants across Whitehall. Very interesting. It seems to be about the Mandelson affair, because he says, to those of you who feel exposed by recent scrutiny, let me say this. This is a letter or an email from the Prime Minister to all civil servants. He says, to those of you who feel exposed by recent scrutiny, let me say this. I value speaking truth to power. That is the hallmark of our system. I want a culture where information flows freely, where risks are flagged early, and where we work together to solve problems before they become crises. The relationship between a minister and their officials relies on a bedrock of total transparency. Without that trust, the partnership that sits at the heart of our constitution cannot function. We are fixing the processes that have failed, but we are not changing the fundamental value we place on your role. The service you give to this country matters. My confidence in the integrity and dedication of the civil service remains absolute. We have a huge job to do for the British people. Well, really interesting. Certainly echoes and I'm sure references to the Mandelson affair there. Lots of people talking about the civil service and working from home as well. Jen in Wolverhampton says, working from home is not necessarily an easy option. I don't go into the office because I'm disabled, but I'm at my desk for 8 o'clock every morning and work non-stop until 6 apart from allocated breaks. We're constantly monitored and would soon be in the bin if we didn't comply, says Jen. On drinking in airports, Alison says, has Ryanair designated or changed the early morning flights as alcohol-free? Michael O'Leary, the chief executive, may not want people drinking at airports, but is he happy to serve them on the flights? And on racist dogs, Wendy has been in touch and says, it is a fact, dogs can be racist. Some dogs find it very hard to read the facial expressions of people with darker skin. If they can't read their emotions, then they react fearfully. My dog goes nuts at black dogs, and my doggy Shrink says it's very common in nervous dogs. Are there such things as animal psychology? Well, there are, of course there are. Wendy, very, very interesting one to hear that, to hear about that. On Madeleine McCann as well, Becca's been in touch and said, I would like to know why Madeleine McCann's parents weren't prosecuted for leaving 3 very young children unattended. If they came from a council estate, there would be more of an uproar about unfit parents. Well, that is a controversy, of course, that continues and has for years, nearly 2 decades now. We're going to talk in just a second more about the issues that you want to talk about, of course. We'll take calls right up to 10 o'clock when Petri Hoskin takes over. We will also talk about a fascinating new book that is out. Natalie Livingston is the author's name, and she'll be joining us in a second. She's written a book about the Nuremberg women. The Nuremberg trials, of course, after the Second World War, were to bring Nazis to justice, and did in many different Nazis. But there are many women involved with those trials, many who played very, very key roles that have just been forgotten until now. And Natalie's book has been reviewed really, really well, and we'll hear more from her in a second, and indeed from you, because there are lots of topics I'd like you to comment on this evening, whether it's Zach Polanski, whether it's Keir Starmer, whether it's civil servants, whether it's working from home and them, and indeed buying alcohol in airport bars. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everyone who's been in touch, including quite a lot of people getting in touch about racist dogs. This person says, we had a racist German Shepherd. He also hated horses and people on crutches. As a family, we'd always say if you were black on crutches and riding a horse, you had it. Caroline in Norfolk says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Caroline. She says, I used to work for local government, and after COVID, they decided we weren't really going back into the office. Most people would work from home. As a single woman living alone, I was getting really lonely, so I found myself a new job working in an office all the time to get some company and to get me out of the house. I also found working from home really expensive. I was heating the house all day, drinking my own coffee and using my own toilet roll, says Caroline in Norfolk. So thank you for that. And Julian says, stop people from buying alcohol in airport bars. You can buy alcohol in duty free anyway, so that's pretty pointless. Lots of different opinions coming into the building, and please do let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about a new book that I would definitely recommend. In fact, don't just take my word for it. Take the words of my colleague Chris Evans, who said it's brilliant. History erased these women. Natalie is writing that wrong. So fascinating. You've got to get this book in your life. Salman Rushdie said Natalie Livingston's deeply researched, unfailingly fascinating book gives the many extraordinary women at or near the centre of Nuremberg trials their proper, important and often ignored place in history, says Salman Rushdie. And Simon Schama, who I think we can all agree is one of the best historians alive today in England and America, wherever he is in the world, I would argue. If you think you know all about the Nuremberg trials, you don't, not until you've read Natalie Livingston's enthralling book. Well, let's talk to Natalie right now. I'm delighted she's joined us. Natalie Livingston, the author of this new book, Sunday Times bestseller. Natalie, thank you so much for speaking to us today about the Nuremberg women. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, this is the 80th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials, which, as you mentioned, was a momentous legal event that has inspired stories about men, books about men, paintings about men. And I don't know if you saw the movie last year, Nuremberg, starring Russell Crowe and Rami Malek, all about men. In fact, this is wildly misleading. I've spent the last 3 years writing and researching a book about the Nuremberg women. It's important to understand that Nuremberg, which was the trial that marked the end of World War II and brought the Nazis to justice, was about so much more than men in robes administering justice. It was a huge ecosystem that required writers, painters, translators, artists, and so many of them were inspiring women.
And tell us about some of them. Give us a few examples of the women who inspired you as you were writing the book.
So I start off with an incredible American lawyer called Harriet Zetterberg, who was a brilliant woman, Yale educated. She was brought to Nuremberg. She was tasked with compiling the dossier, which led to the conviction of Hans Frank, who was one of the most vicious and evil of the Nazi defendants. He was known as the Butcher of Poland. And Harriet worked night and day in freezing cold conditions in the Palace of Justice, where the Nuremberg trials took place, with faulty equipment, under a 20-watt light bulb. She worked and worked and worked endlessly. When it came to actually being able to present the evidence in court, she was not allowed to do so. The reason she was not allowed to speak in court is because she was a woman. At that time, American lawyers were not allowed to advocate in court. In order to do so, they would have had to have obtained a waiver of disability, and that disability was that she was a woman. So, which is quite extraordinary.
It's astonishing how times have changed even in just a few decades. It would be unthinkable now, but it was very much there. I just wonder, with that, there was presumably researching a book. I've written 2 books myself. There's quite a lot of quite dry research to do a lot of the time. How do you make that come alive in your book? Because so many people have praised the writing in this book. The Spectator says that you have an eye for drama and effortless fluency that keeps the pages turning, such a fresh and compelling narrative. That is not always the case with books about history, even fascinating history such as Nuremberg.
Well, that's very kind of them to say so, but actually it was the women, these 8 extraordinary women in the book, who did all the work for me. These technicolor, amazing, diverse, nuanced, powerful, passionate, fearless women who just jumped out from the pages. And really, these were stories that have been marginalised and really left to footnotes in history, and they were begging to be told. And I'm just delighted that finally I was able to tell their stories.
How do they resonate right now, do you think, especially with so much anti-Semitism that is around, so many people talking about, so many Jews very worried about the rhetoric that is happening in our society today? This is obviously the 80th anniversary, but there are other reasons I'm sure this book has been a success because of the timing too.
Yeah, well, obviously, these are incredibly bleak, worrying and terrifying times for the Jewish community. And anyone, with a heart can't bear to see any minorities suffering. What the story has shown me most of all, though, is the resilience of the women, their hope, their ability to find light amongst the darkness, their ability to seek for truth amongst a sea of disinformation, and their ability to hope for the future. And I think that's a really important message today, when there is so much hopelessness and there is so much darkness, that these women were able to find lightness and truth and love in a broken situation. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that now.
Tell us your favourite aspect of this. Tell us your favourite character, and perhaps a little anecdote about what you've written about and that will inspire us here on this Wednesday evening.
Well, really, for me, the heart and soul of the book is a fearless French resistance fighter, a passionate, fearless French resistance fighter called Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier. It's actually her image that's in the centre of the book coverage, the book cover. Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier was arrested in 1942. She was sent on a transport with 229 other French resistance fighting women to Auschwitz. She survived in Auschwitz and then Ravensbrück for 2 years. She stayed on for 3 months longer than required after liberation to look after those who were too sick and infirm to travel home by themselves. And then on the 28th of January 1946, she took to the stand in Nuremberg, this fragile, beautiful French woman. And for 2 hours, she laid bare the truth about the camps. She was the first person to break the horror of the Holocaust to the world. She was able to recount the suffering and the endless barbarism that was inflicted on so many of the women who she'd been in the transport with, who she'd met in the camps. And what she did that was absolutely extraordinary was she was able to restore names to those who had just been reduced to numbers and then ash. And if that wasn't enough, at the end of this extraordinary 2-hour testimony, which I believe is one of the most powerful pieces of oratory in modern history, she got down from the stand and she took her time to look at each and every Nazi who was in that defendant's box and look at them and have her moment of reckoning with them. And in her eyes, she had in her mind the faces of those who had been sacrificed to their evil.
Goodness me, I mean, it just sounds incredibly powerful. I wonder what sort of relationship so many people have with the Holocaust, because it is unspeakable, yet we heard, as you say, so much information at the Nuremberg trials. It almost was an embarrassment, and to some degree rightly so, for many years. Now we're talking about it again. We have Holocaust museums. We've got to educate people on it who write it off, or who don't know the full detail of it through ignorance or through willful ignorance, certainly. And that's something that I really care about and I'm very passionate about. And I know the Holocaust Educational Trust does a lot of really, really good work here in the UK. I just wonder, in the 80 years since Nuremberg, there have been times, of course, when people haven't wanted to talk about it. Even Jewish people haven't wanted to talk about the Holocaust because of the horror that was there. How much of that sort of tracking have you felt when it's coming to write this book?
Well, I mean, for me personally, the Holocaust has loomed very large in my life. I'm the granddaughter of Hungarian Holocaust survivors. So for me, it's always been imperative to keep memory alive. It's been a duty, and memory, for me has been sacred. And one of the fascinating things about the Nuremberg trials, and something that was noted by one of the women I write about, Rebecca West, who was a titan of journalism. She said that the Holocaust can never be disputed because of all the documentation and all the evidence that had been amassed for Nuremberg. And I think that's something very important to remember. The truth is there, the evidence is there, and it can be seen in Nuremberg.
And it can be read about in this fascinating new book, The Nuremberg Women, which transforms what we think we know, says one critic, Peter Frankopan. It is an instant Sunday Times bestseller. Congratulations to Natalie, and great to talk to you, Natalie Livingston. Really appreciate that. Actually, Natalie, maybe you can just stay where you are just for a second, because Stephen is on the line and has a question, actually. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you, sir. It's about the Nuremberg trial. It's about the Scottish lawyer who managed to prosecute Hermann Goering, managed to find out that he was guilty. I was wondering if the lady knows much about him. So Maxwell Fyfe.
Is that something that has come up in your scholarship there, Natalie?
Well, my book is, as I said, what the traditional narrative about Nuremberg has very much been, as Rebecca West said, a man's world, a man's world. So my focus and the thing that's driven me for the last 3 years has been trying to rescue these incredible women from the margins and the footnotes of history. So the lawyers that I've focused on are female lawyers, but that doesn't mean that there weren't incredible contributions by men and by women lawyers at the Nuremberg trials. And I'd be fascinated to learn more about this lawyer that you're talking about. He sounds like an absolutely sensational legal brain.
Stephen, there's so much to learn, isn't there? It's almost endless. There's so much to learn about it. And that's partially, Stephen, why I love history, because there's always more.
Yes, sir. Have you ever saw the film Just Nuremberg? 1960, Spencer Tracy.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, listen.
That's a great film.
Okay.
That's one of the greatest movies of all time, actually.
Great stuff. Well, Stephen, thanks for your call, and thank you, Natalie, and every good wish with the book as well, Natalie. That's Natalie Livingston there. Her book is called, quite simply, The Nuremberg Women. I know it'll be on my list to read properly. I've read quite a lot about it, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and read it just yet. Lots of people getting in touch, including quite a number of people about dogs. Debbie has also said that Mr. Ryanair, Michael O'Leary, going to stop selling booze on his planes? People might be annoyed they have to cram their luggage into little bags at their feet because he charges a fortune for normal luggage and people are shoved in like sardines. That's probably why all his passengers are annoyed. Amy says, regarding the Telegraph story about an unnamed union leader saying Starmer has to go, could there be a point where, if Starmer says he isn't going to go, then the trade unions would start withdrawing their funding from the Labour Party? Well, that's certainly a technique that has happened before and has worked before. Ian says, my nan had a Yorkshire Terrier. It was generally well behaved, but couldn't stand anybody from Lancashire. Very good, Ian. And Brian says, we had a dog that used to chase people on bikes. In the end, we took the bike off him. Yes, there's quite a lot of people talking about dogs and their views on other people and whether dogs can be racist, which apparently they can. So there we are. Lots more to discuss in the final section of the programme, which is coming up after the break. We'll speak to Susie in Hertfordshire about anti-Semitism, and a number of other callers want to get in as well. We'll also have a quick chat with Petri Hoskin, who's coming up between 10 and 1. So stay tuned for all of that here on the Evening Exchange. Stay with us here on Talk.
Starmer fueling anti-Semitism?
I don't think he's doing anything to deal with anti-Semitism. The attempt to gaslight the British people and the Jewish community is appalling.
This has to stop. It's almost being normalised, and it's terrifying, and we're sick of it. Enough's enough.
Don't be shocked, and don't you bloody dare claim to be shocked or upset or care about Jewish people being stabbed on the streets of our capital city in broad daylight. This is on you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ben is in London and has... Actually, no, we'll go to Ben in just a second. We'll go to Susie in Hertfordshire first, who wants to talk about anti-Semitism. Susie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Evening, Peter.
Good evening.
There's a common thread that's been said over and over and over again by callers, by people that are being interviewed, and not just on Talk. This is in general, and it's something that is really sticking in my claw. When talking about Zach Polanski and even Keir Starmer's wife and saying, oh, well, they're Jewish.
Yeah.
Judaism isn't just a religion, it's a people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, to be honest, personally, it's insulting, the stuff that I mean, she hasn't come out and said anything at all.
Mm-hmm. It's also, you cannot assume someone thinks something simply because they have a cultural background. I mean, you know, people might assume I think certain things because I'm a Protestant from Northern Ireland. Well, you should never assume these things, and you should never say, well, simply because someone has a certain colour of skin or a background or a religion, that they think a certain thing.
Precisely. And in my opinion, Zach and Mrs. Starmer are actually a traitor to the people.
I mean, that's a strong word to use, Susie. And you know, Victoria Starmer, she hasn't said anything on this issue. She's not really a political figure. She happens to be married to the Prime Minister. But is it fair to say that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And and the reason why is that there's not a single synagogue that has been torched where someone actually found out if the synagogue was pro-Israel or not. I mean, that's. Move away from the fact that in the Bible God promised Jacob the land of Israel and all of that. We'll move away from that because I'm not that religious. But the fact that she hasn't come out, she has a platform. She could say something, even if it's just.
But again, in her defence, Susie, I don't think she said anything about any political issue.
No, she hasn't. But if she's part of the Jewish people, then we all have to stand up for one another. Okay. You went to Israel. Let me put it to you this way. You went to Israel.
Yep.
You saw Hostage Square.
Yep.
You saw how Jews across the world were affected by October the 7th, by the hostages. I mean, I'm reading Rachel Goldberg Pollin's book at the moment, and I do it as I'm walking the dog, and I am doing it in absolute floods of tears because hers feels like my cousin, my brother, you know, like a relative of mine. This is how the Jewish people are. We stick together. And it's fine for you to criticise the political side of Israel, but to criticise its legitimacy.
And I agree with you on all of those particular points, Susie. I suppose my point is that members of political families are not political figures themselves, and you know, I don't know her reasons for not wanting to speak out on this issue, And again, I suppose it comes back to assumption. And I'm not being critical of you, Susie. I'm simply saying that if she doesn't want to say anything, she doesn't have to. And I'm not sure that it's right to criticise her for staying silent, although you clearly disagree with that, Susie, and that's a perfectly legitimate point of view too.
I just feel like she doesn't need to stand in front of the microphone. She could write a statement and say, you know, yes, I am Jewish and I stand with the Jewish people that are being targeted across the world. I mean, this isn't just
of course.
It's an everywhere problem at the moment.
Susie, that's a really interesting perspective. I just want to get Ben in before the news, but will you give me a ring on another occasion, Susie, and we can have a longer conversation?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. That's Susie in Hertfordshire. Really interesting to hear her perspective. Just want to get Ben in before the end of the programme. Ben is in London. Ben, what are your thoughts?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for letting me call. I want you to talk about the Foreign Office, because if you go on the Foreign Office website and about travel to particular countries, for example, Afghanistan, Iran, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Nigeria, Congo, Gaza, Lebanon, they all say don't go there because it's dangerous, and they say don't go there because it's a risk of life, and plus there's no consular help. So my question is, why is the same office, the same Foreign Office, welcoming those people into this country?
It's a very, very good point.
Why is no journalist or push the government or the Foreign Office on this matter?
It's a really good point, and we absolutely should, Ben. Listen, thanks for that point. I appreciate that. That's Ben in London there. Thanks also to Alex in Cardiff, who said this drinking at airports in general worries me. Many people enjoy a drink to start a holiday, but it's more the general direction we are heading in. It seems that our grandparents, most of whom are dead now, fought for the freedom that many British people enjoy. But more and more we're told what we can or can't do. It seems we're sleepwalking into totalitarianism at a slow and steady pace, in Alex's opinion. Children should be taught to question everything and have critical thinking, but are more and more taught to taking everything they are taught as fact. If you're just indoctrinated to the radical left from youth, they can't even debate. With my two nieces who are early 20s, if I challenge anything on net zero, they switch off and think I'm just wrong. The country wants visionaries, but the school curriculum seems to do more and more to discourage freedom of thought. I just think of Animal Farm and the rule changes from 4 legs good, 2 legs bad to 4 legs good, 2 legs better. It seems the whole of the EU is heading in this way, and maybe JD Vance was right. Maybe someone should ask what we are fighting for. Is it for the freedoms we enjoy to liberal elite politicians taking our freedoms away, says Alex in Cardiff. Well, Alex, really interesting, thought-provoking points there from you, from Susie, from Ben, and indeed from all our callers, texters, tweeters, and people sending voice notes. All I would say is there's so many thoughts, so many different opinions this evening. For most people in this country, there's an election tomorrow. I am not going to tell you how to vote, because that would A, be a breach of electoral law, and B, I would never dream of doing so, because it's not up to me who you vote for. What I would say is please, please use your vote, have your say, and make sure that your voice is heard. It'll continue to be heard on this station, on my programmes. I'm back tomorrow at 7, and indeed for the next 3 hours with Petri Hoskin. Hi, Petri.
Hello there. Yes, I've got a fascinating story at 10. Absolutely incredible. I don't know whether you've heard about the Sarajevo safari hunters.
No.
So back in the siege of Sarajevo, according to reports that are now coming out, and there were rumours at the time, in the later 90s, that very rich people were paying to kill civilians. So they were arriving in Sarajevo, taking up sniper positions, and they were paying money to kill civilians. Children would get the most. You had to pay the most money to shoot a child. Pregnant women, and they used to battle to see which was the prettiest woman they could shoot dead.
I mean, this sounds like a dystopian novel.
It sounds like a dystopian novel, but the Italian judiciary is taking this incredibly seriously. There's been reports from Yugoslav intelligence officers and a new book that's just come out. And this is absolutely, I mean, there aren't words, are there, to describe people paying to go and shoot human beings during a siege.